Hey everyone, thanks so much for stopping by. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy.
When Monkey D. Luffy was 7, he boldly declared that Princess Usagi would one day be his queen. Years later, that childish promise becomes reality. As Usagi turns 21, a now 22-year-old Luffy arrives with his bewildered crew for a royal wedding that will shake both seas and stars. With sailors Tenshi, pirates, and the unexpected presence of Ace and Sabo, chaos, laughter, and heartfelt moments unfold before and during the ceremony, proving that some promises, no matter how impossible, are never meant to be broken. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is The Princess and the Pirate by Saranghae Tenshi. Respect to author.
Chapter 10. Conversations lead to pending questions. I hope that you do not mind sharing the rooms, said Hotaru. It took a while for the huge group to walk together to find out where everyone would be roomed at. Walking with the quiet Hotaru, everyone didn't know what to say. Shanks tried to joke about something, but the tension that he could also feel made him stop short. It wasn't long that Hotaru stopped in front of 3 doors before the hallway split into 2 up ahead. As Hotaru stopped, the others stopped as well. Hotaru turned to Marco as she addressed the shared rooms. Sharing? Questioned Curiel. Nodded Hotaru. These 3 bedrooms can hold 5 people. Then, it is fine that we shared the rooms, Yoi, said Marco. I believe that you Whitebeard pirates can figure out who would be rooming with whom, said Hotaru. Just, do not destroy the bedrooms. What happens if we do? Questioned a curious Jozu. You will face the wrath of certain Senshi, said Hotaru. The Whitebeard pirates shivered slightly at the ominous way Hotaru said that statement. Even those of the Straw Hats shivered when they heard that statement. Hotaru smiled innocently as she gestured for the Straw Hats, Shanks, and Dragon to follow her, leaving the Whitebeard pirates to themselves. Once they knew that the group was out of sight, Marco sighed before gesturing to one of the bedrooms for an impromptu meeting. Once they opened one bedroom, all of the commanders gaped at the size of the rooms. No wonder Hotaru said that they would be sharing the rooms, thought everyone. Now that we know we can easily fit more people in here, said Marco, shall we get this meeting started, Yoi? I'll start by saying, trailed off Haruta before yelling, Ace is alive. Yeah, said Atmos, that little, he didn't even have the decency to tell us that he was alive all this time. So, if he was alive all this time, started Curiel, who ended in a question, then, who was it that we buried next to Pops? That question stopped the commanders short as they thought about it. Of course, they buried Ace next to Pops, right? They even knew that the Mera Mera no Mi was reformed and found its way towards Ace's little brother. They didn't know what Ace's little brother did with the fruit, but they heard that Luffy said not to worry about the fruit, that it was in good hands. However, since Ace was technically alive, did that mean the Mera Mera no Mi that Luffy found was a dud? Everything was so confusing that only Thatch pointed out something else out. Forget about who we buried, said Thatch, what I want to know is, what kind of mark is that? That is a weird mark, commented Blenheim. Our mark isn't even on his back anymore, bemoaned Izo. So, does this mean, Ace isn't our brother anymore, questioned Vista. That question stopped the commanders once again. The Whitebeard's mark was sacred to everyone on the crew. They all believed that they are brothers and the mark signified that. However, they never once knew someone who could practically have a different mark where they knew the Whitebeard's mark was supposed to be. So, did that really mean Ace isn't their brother? We just have to corner Ace and ask him, Yoi, said Marco with conviction. With the Straw Hats. I believe that you all can share these bedrooms, said Hotaru. Leaving the Whitebeards to their own devices, Hotaru led the others down to the right of the split hallway. It was there that 2 different doors were shown to the group. The boys of the Straw Hat crew just shrugged their shoulders because they were already accustomed to staying in one room while the girls had the other. Hotaru smiled indulgently as she gestured for Dragon and Shanks to follow her, leaving the Straw Hat crew. Before they could go into the rooms though, Hotaru turned back and said, you break the rooms, you will not like the consequences. Kawaii, scary, exclaimed Usopp, Chopper, and Brook. I like her, said a smiling Robin. You would, said a sweat-dropping Frankie. So, shall we talk about what we found out, questioned Nami. Without Luffy, questioned Zoro. I'm sure he'll be fine, said Nami, who pushed them into one of the rooms, he's Luffy. Zoro grunted as he was being pushed with the rest into one of the bedrooms. The Straw Hats stopped short as they saw that the bedroom had 6 different beds and was spacious. Everyone could see that the room was just right for the 6 boys to sleep in this one. Nami was surprised by the spacious room that she ran out of the room to look into Robin and hers. She came back into the boys' room to have an irritated tick over her right eyebrow. "What's wrong, witch?" questioned Zoro. "Your room is more spacious than Robin's and mine," said Nami. "That's not fair." "Of course, it's fair," said Frankie. "We are 6 people and you and Robin are just 2. HMPH, pouted Nami. "Besides," said Usopp, "why do you need all this space?" "Hello," said Nami, "I have outfits that I have to get from this island. Did you see the shops here while we walked to the castle?" "Of course you did," sighed Usopp. "I am sure that we will have time to shop for the wedding," said Robin. "After all, we all need to find a wedding gift to give to Shusho-san and his new wife." "That's what I don't get," muttered Sanji. "What is it this time, Arrow Cook?" grumbled Zoro. "How?" started Sanji. "How?" questioned Brook. "How did Luffy manage to get a lovely lady as the princess?" yelled out Sanji before lowering down to the ground. "He's an idiot." "True," said Nami. "Yo-ho-ho-ho," laughed Brook. "It seems as though Luffy-san is very charismatic when it comes to the ladies." "Yeah," said Frankie, who knew. Sanji just sobbed on the ground as he couldn't wrap his head around a princess being married to an idiot like his captain. The others also really wanted to know just how Luffy knew a princess from the start. Because everyone was thoughtful about this idea, excluding Sanji who was weeping in a corner, they all snapped out of it when they heard a knock on the door. All blinked in unison when they heard the knock on the door. Since Chopper was closest to the door, he went and opened it to reveal. "Vivi-chan," exclaimed Nami. "Rebecca-san," said Robin. "Shirahoshi-kwan," exclaimed Sanji with a weird wiggle to his entire body. "Sashi Berry, long time no see, Mina, everyone," said Vivi with a smile. "I told you I heard them," said Rebecca with a victorious smile. What are you all doing here?" questioned Usopp. "We were invited to the wedding," said Shirahoshi, "along with our families." Exclaimed the Straw Hats who didn't know the wedding guest list. "With Hotaru, Dragon, and Shanks." "Gomen Nasai for bothering you, Tomo-san," said a Senshi up ahead. "Demo, Her Majesty would like a word with these 2. Coronis, said Hotaru, "I was just showing them their rooms. Demo, if the queen demands it, then I shall show them to the throne room." Sailor Coronis, as Dragon and Shanks now knew, nodded her head before disappeared in a different hall, her message complete. Dragon and Shanks were surprised that more Senshi were running around the palace. However, before they could ask about it, Hotaru motioned for the 2 to follow her. The 3 walked for a bit before they arrived in front of 2 large double doors. Hotaru, with all of her strength, pushed the double doors open before motioning for the 2 to follow into the throne room. There, Dragon and Shanks saw the most beautiful woman they ever laid eyes on. She had long silvery white hair that was up into Odango and had kind silver eyes. She was also the only one situated in a throne-like chair with Garp standing right next to her left. "Well, if it isn't the 2 late brats," said Garp. "Garp-san," said Hotaru, "I was showing them to their rooms before Coronis-san found us." "Still?" questioned Garp. "Of course," said Hotaru with her arms crossed. "Luffy Baka invited so many people to live in the palace." "Hotaru," exclaimed the woman. "Gomen, Serenity Josama," said Hotaru with a bow, just stating the truth. When Hotaru called the woman Serenity Josama, they now knew that they were in the presence of the present queen of the Silver Moon Kingdom Island. The 2 still couldn't wrap their heads over the fact that Luffy would become king after his wedding. What about the promise to become the Pirate King? Shanks was kind of worried that Luffy would forget his promise to him. The worry must have shown on his face because the queen addressed him. "Is everything alright, Shanks-san?" questioned Queen Serenity. "You know my name?" questioned Shanks. "But, of course," said Queen Serenity, "I've heard a lot about a red-haired pirate that is a father figure to little Luffy." "Ah," said Shanks as he scratched his cheek lightly, "it was nothing." "Of course, it was something," said Queen Serenity. "I am happy to know that Luffy had someone, though brief, watch over him." Shanks blushed a bit more at the compliment. He could see Hotaru smile before silently leaving the throne room. He also could see how Garp was glaring fiercely at Shanks for influencing Luffy to become a pirate. He also saw Dragon nod his head slightly in approval though. Shanks turned back to see the kind eyes of the queen looking directly at him. Queen Serenity, however, smiled back at Shanks before addressing Dragon. "It is nice to finally meet the one who had a hand in conceiving my son-in-law," said Queen Serenity. "I would have raised him myself," confessed Dragon. "Demo, I am not equipped to raise Luffy when I am against the world government." "HMPH, said Garp, "at least, you had the decency to contact me to help you keep Luffy safe." Of course, said Dragon, I love my son. I still keep tabs on him through other means. I have to wonder, said Queen Serenity, exactly why did you start the Revolutionary Army? Because we needed change, said Dragon, we need to stop the slavery that the world nobles have wrought. We have to oppose that the so-called absolute justice the world government sprouts is due to the corrupted nobles. Queen Serenity just watched on as Garp jumped in to argue that the Marines were doing their job. Shanks was also silent as Dragon fought back that the world government that the so-called Marines were under were following something very sinister. Garp was clenching his fist as Dragon also pointed out that due to blood that ran within someone, the world government had the right to just execute them for that as a crime. Garp knew that what Dragon said was just a jab to irritate him about how he couldn't even save Ace due to him being the son of the infamous pirate, Galdi. Roger. As the two fought, Shanks was the one who slowly walked towards Queen Serenity. Queen Serenity turned her head to look at Shanks while the verbal fight started up again. So, I have a question, said Shanks. Is this about why you looked worried? Questioned Queen Serenity. Ah, I guess you didn't forget about that then, said Shanks with a sheepish look before asking, is Luffy really going to become king? Hi, said Queen Serenity, demo, not after I have long passed away. Questioned Shanks. Shanks-san, said Queen Serenity, even though Luffy will become king to this island one day, that day is not today. He still has a promise to keep, nay. You know about that promise? Questioned Shanks. That's all Luffy has ever said whenever he could, said Queen Serenity with a light laugh, and who am I to stifle his dream by making him king before he could achieve it? Shanks nodded his head as tension left his shoulders. Of course, Luffy wouldn't let a silly thing as marriage to stop him from reaching his dreams. Shanks could also see that Queen Serenity was very benevolent. Yet, for now, he could see that Queen Serenity grew tired of the verbal fighting that Garp and Dragon were doing. Queen Serenity, for all of her patience, just raised her hand and a wave of silver winds blew the two men away from each other. Shanks looked at the attack in surprise, wondering if it was a devil fruit power. What was that? Questioned Garp. It is time to rest before dinner, said Queen Serenity, and I grew tired of the verbal fighting within the throne room. Demo, Serenity, said Garp. Said Queen Serenity, we are all here for a wedding with little Luffy and my dear daughter. This is not the place to squabble like little children. Fine, huffed Garp as he crossed his arms. Demo, you know that I am right. What was that, my friend? Questioned Queen Serenity with a glare. Nothing, cowed Garp. I thought so, said a smug Queen Serenity. Shanks and Dragon gaped a bit when they saw how Queen Serenity handled Garp though. Not even Dragon could have Garp cower. But, that may have to do with the fact that Garp was Dragon's father. A different Senshi came into the room and kneeled in front of the queen. This Senshi had dark brown hair that was in a short bob and was wearing a brown and yellow sailor uniform. Queen Serenity addressed the Senshi as Sailor Astarte and told her to take Shanks and Dragon to their rooms. The known sailor Senshi, Astarte, made a confirmation towards the queen before gesturing the two males to follow her. It didn't take long as there were two doors shown from Dragon and Shanks. Shanks didn't waste any time and went into his room. There, he was surprised how fancy the bedroom looked before he settled onto his own bed. It only took a few seconds but Shanks shot back up on his bed and exclaimed, I can't believe that I forgot to ask how Ace was still alive. Arg. Rubs his head before settling down. Well, this is becoming an adventure on its own, murmured Shanks. Anchor's brothers are all alive. With ASL and Princess Serenity. So, said Sabo and Ace at the same time once they were in Serenity's room, how did you survive? Who survived? Questioned Luffy before really looking at Ace. Who are you? Lu, groaned Ace, it's me. Ace, questioned Luffy with a tilt of his head. Hi, said Ace with a sigh, I'm AWO. Ace, cried out Luffy as he launched himself and wrapped his arms around Ace, you're here. You're alive. Ace just sighed before having a small smile on his face. He didn't care that his body started to shiver as he held his own tears in. He didn't care that Sabo came into the hug as well. All that was there was the comfort that Luffy also didn't die at Marineford after he was magically whisked away by Hotaru to be resurrected by her and Mercury. Sabo, too, was looking as though his eyes were a bit misty. It wasn't long that a flash of light came from somewhere that broke the three brothers away. All three turned to see a grinning Serenity with a camera in her hands. Now, this was a Kodak moment, exclaimed a giggling Serenity. Imoto Usagi, cried out the three brothers. Well, it was, said a smiling Serenity. Demo, shouldn't you points at Sabo tell us how you survived all those years? Not after he points at Ace tells Lu and me how he survived, said Sabo. Fair enough, said Serenity with a shrug. Chapter 11, the ASL reunion and Sabo's explanation. Ace twitched one of his eyebrows at how calm Serenity was when saying that he would go first in explaining. In his opinion, Sabo should go first because Sabo was the one who got blown up by that stupid celestial dragon guy. Sabo was also the one who had forgotten his real family and just went about his life as whatever his profession is. Crossing his arms, Ace glared at Sabo first. He wouldn't necessarily glare at his Saranghae unless it was justified, but he will glare at his supposed dead brother to get his message across. Luffy, on his part, grabbed Serenity out of the crossfire that he believed would happen within her bedroom. Wrapping an arm around Serenity's waist, he settled the both of them on top of her bed, waiting for the blowout between his two Nichiner for a story. What do you mean that I have to explain first, Sabo? Asked Ace, whose one eyebrow was still twitching. Exactly what I said, Ace, said Sabo, who crossed his arms. You were dead for a few years. Yeah, well, snapped back Ace, you were dead for several years, but you look like you are in perfect health here. Why, thank you, sassed back Sabo. Why you, started Ace as his right fist started to become a certain red fiery hue. So, we are doing that, questioned Sabo, who smirked and one of his fists started to become the same. Ace was glaring at Sabo before noticing the red fiery hue on Sabo's fist. Serenity was blinking in bewilderment as well. Both didn't know what happened to the Mara no Mi until now. Serenity and Ace looked at the fist before both pairs of eyes looked at Sabo in astonishment. Luffy, though, smiled happily as he saw the familiar powers of the Mara no Mi being used by his other Nissan. Yet, he was thinking on why Ace's fist was producing the same familiar hue as the Mara no Mi powers from before. His face was scrunched up as he thought more about it. Maybe Ace retained some of the fruit's powers when the fruit thought Ace died too. Luffy was so into his thoughts that he didn't notice that Serenity and his Nissan were looking at Luffy in worry. Lu, questioned Ace. What's wrong with Luffy, questioned Serenity. Maybe he's about to cry again, said a thoughtful Sabo. Luffy, questioned Serenity as she placed a hand on his. Ah, yelled out Luffy, thinking hurts. Exclaimed the three. Geez, Lu, sighed Ace, we thought something was seriously wrong with you. Yeah, no kidding, sighed Sabo as well. Serenity didn't have any notion about letting Luffy off the hook as she hit the top of Luffy's head lightly. She wasn't opposed to hitting his head gently because Luffy knew whenever she did that, he messed up somehow. At least, it wasn't a glaive this time. Luffy laughed his unique laugh before pulling Serenity into a side hug. He knew he worried his other precious people as well as he smiled up at his Nissan from his position. Worui, my bad, said Luffy with a smile. Worui, he says, sighs Ace. At least, we know that Luffy will always stay Luffy, said Sabo. Nodded Ace before turning back to what happened. So, you ate the Mara no Mi. Yeah, said Sabo, Doflamingo somehow gotten a hold of your fruit and, well, I just couldn't let one of his people or Blackbeard gets their filthy hands in it. Thoughtful look, actually, that's also where I met up with Lu. He was in that Coliseum to win your fruit first before I took over his disguise. And I don't regret it, said Luffy. Lu, said Ace with a touch of affection before, wait a minute. Why was Lu even near that warlord? Turao wanted to take down the flamingo guy, said Luffy without a care. Turao, questioned Serenity, who is that? Yes, Sabo, said Ace with gritted teeth, who is this Turao and do I need to teach him a lesson in making our Ododo fight another warlord? Turao is Trafalgar Law, said Sabo, and don't worry. I spoke to him before I left Dressrosa. Good, said Ace. Luffy looked confused as Ace and Sabo were talking about Trafalgar, or as he knows him as Turao. He didn't know why they were talking about him, but he just shrugged it off as he waited for the story of Ace's survival. Luffy smiled inwardly as he felt his Usagi melt into his embrace while the both waited for his Nichin older brothers to stop their arguments and explain how both of them survived. Serenity, on her part, was just happy that they stopped using their flames. She did not want her bedroom to burn down due to manly pride. So, trailed off Serenity before continuing, who is going to explain to us everything. Sabo, said Ace, you should explain how you survived that blast before I do. Besides shrugging, I need Hotaru to explain in my story. Really? Asked a skeptical Sabo. Really, said Ace, she and Mercury were the ones to help revive me, and you know Hotaru's powers. Fine, sighed Sabo. Finally, exclaimed Luffy, I get to hear how Sabo ni survived. You didn't explain to Luffy how you survived, asked Ace with a raised eyebrow. I had to go on the run after helping Luffy with Doflamingo, said Sabo in exasperation. I wasn't supposed to expose myself in the first place. Dragon's orders. Dragon, questioned Serenity. My Tosen, questioned Luffy. Sabo sighed as he tried to explain what happened after Luffy was sleeping and Sabo stopped by. He couldn't help it that the Revolutionary Army was supposed to be unseen by everyone, especially once he got word that CP0 was coming for the Revolutionary Army. Ace and Serenity nodded their heads as they realized the danger Sabo was in if this CP0 guy was coming to Dressrosa. However, the two looked at Sabo with curiosity and anticipation as they waited for how Sabo survived. Sabo sighed once more and looked at his family. "What do you want me to explain?" questioned Sabo. "Like I said," said Ace, "how you survived. Dogra told us that you went out on a boat and got shot at. He said that you were dead." "Yeah," said Sabo as he rubbed the back of his head, "I wasn't really dead. More like, I had amnesia." "Amy ni a?" questioned Luffy. "Ea, Lu," said Sabo, amnesia. "It means that I lost my memories after the blast that came from the Celestial Dragon's boat. Luckily, Dragon was actually on Dawn Island and rescued me before I did die." "So," questioned a sad Serenity, "you've forgotten about us?" Nodded a solemn Sabo. "When I woke up, I didn't know who I was but knew that I didn't want to go back to Dawn Island. I have been training in the Revolutionary Army under Dragon until I set out as their Chief of Staff." "Chief of Staff?" questioned Ace. "It's like being second in command for the Revolutionary Army," explained Sabo. "So, Sabo is like really, really strong," said a starry-eyed Luffy. Sabo laughed slightly as he confirmed what Luffy said. Ace scoffed and said that Sabo couldn't be stronger than him. Sabo had a glint in his eyes as he looked at Ace. It looked like Ace and Sabo were going to challenge each other to see who was the strongest. However, Serenity looked at the two in worry. She was all for them sparring, but for them to use their flames and set her bedroom on fire. No, thank you to that thought. Luffy, on the other hand, was laughing and waiting in anticipation. He didn't care that this was Serenity's bedroom that was about to be demolished by his two Onisan. Though, he looked nervous and protective when Serenity came right in between the two brothers. "USA?" questioned Luffy. "Imoto?" questioned Sabo and Ace. "No fighting in my bedroom," said a furious Serenity, "you want to burn my bedroom down." "Gomen," said the chastised brothers. "You should be," said Serenity, "I mean, if you burnt my bedroom down, where am I supposed to sleep?" "With me," exclaimed an unabashed Luffy. "Not before the wedding, Baka," said Ace who hit Luffy over the head, hard. "Itai, ow," exclaimed Luffy who now had tears in his eyes. "That's what you get for suggesting something like that," said Ace. "Sabo," whined Luffy. "I have to agree with Ace on this one," said Sabo, "even if Sarah Imoto is your fiancé. It would be improper for her to room with you before the wedding." Luffy pouted as he rubbed the bump that formed on his head. He just wanted to have more time with Serenity before the big day. All they would actually do was snuggle with each other like when they were all kids. Luffy voiced that out to Sabo and Ace and was promptly cuddled by Serenity while Sabo and Ace covered their mouths. Luffy always says the darnest things earnestly when all of them were together. With an arm around Serenity, Luffy gave a big smile to Ace and Sabo while being cuddled close with Serenity. "You think he planned to say that?" whispered Ace. "With Lu," whispered back Sabo, "who knows?" "Why are you whispering?" questioned a content Serenity. "Nothing, Imoto," said the two. "So, aren't you guys going to fight?" questioned Luffy. "As Serenity said Sabo, not here. Besides, don't you want to hear how Ace survived, Lu?" "Oh yeah," exclaimed Luffy as he turned his attention to Ace. "Thanks a lot, Sabo," said Ace under his breath. Sabo, even though he didn't hear it, smirked at Ace. If he had to tell Serenity and Ace how he survived, then it was only fair that Luffy and he got to know how Ace survived. Ace gave a stink eye at Sabo before bracing himself for telling his survival story. However, Ace was probably thankful that a knock on Serenity's door interrupted on what Ace was about to explain. Sabo, however, glowered at whoever was knocking on the door that interrupted Ace. It wasn't fair that he told his story while Ace was being free on not explaining his survival. Yanking the door, Sabo was about to yell at the person only to see that it was Hotaru behind the door. "Hoda-chan?" questioned Sabo. "Hi," said Hotaru as she pushed into the bedroom. "So, why are you here?" questioned Luffy. "Dinner is starting," informed Hotaru. "So, we should go to dinner then," said Ace who stretched. "Don't think that you are getting out of telling Lu and I how you survived, Ace," glowered Sabo. "Ace still hasn't told you," questioned Hotaru. "EA," said Sabo, "he keeps on being lucky that something distracts us." "Demo," said Hotaru, "it's easy to explain." Sabo and Luffy looked at Hotaru expectantly. They really wanted to know how Ace survived because for all they knew, Ace died. Sabo also had the powers of the Maramara no Mi. Hotaru blinked as she saw the expected blue and brown eyes staring at her while Ace casually let her explain. Serenity, though, was tapping her foot on the carpet floor because she was hungry and really wanted to eat before Luffy and Ace got their hands on the food. Who knows when the two black holes would stop eating? Hotaru could see that Serenity was being agitated before looking at a smug Ace. Ace should really explain it to you, said Hotaru. Demo, said the brothers. After all, said Hotaru, who ignored the brothers, you wouldn't want an irritated Serenity on your hands when she doesn't get food into her, do you? I guess you are right, said Sabo. Then, let's go to dinner, said Serenity, and then, Ace can explain. Demo, said Ace weakly. No buts, mister, said Serenity and Hotaru together. Ace inwardly pouted as he was getting ganged up by the females. Sabo and Luffy laughed at the disgruntled look Ace was sporting. Still pouting inwardly, Ace marched past the four and opened the door, Ace quickly marching out towards the dining room where everyone would be. Serenity, not wanting to miss out on the food, quickly followed Ace, who was quickly followed by Hotaru. It was then that the two females smiled and started to talk to Ace about anything and everything. Though, they left Sabo and Luffy to look at Ace with fond smiles. Come on, Lu, said Sabo, let's catch up with them. Nodded Luffy, though, don't you think Ace looks happier than we last saw him? Considering that I last saw him when we were 10, said Sabo disgruntledly, then, yes. Good, said Luffy with a nod, Ace should always be happy. Hi, said Sabo, all of us should. With that, the two quickly ran towards the three leaving people and promptly glomped the three together. Hotaru and Serenity giggled as Ace gave a grunt at the added weight. It was there that the Straw Hat Pirates and the Whitebeard Pirates saw their nakama, Sabo, Hotaru, and Serenity talking and laughing like no tomorrow. The Straw Hat Pirates were looking at them fondly, but the Whitebeard Pirates, they had a sad, thoughtful look on their faces as they saw how free Ace looked. He looks freer here than anywhere else, thought the Whitebeard Pirates. Ace looks freer with them than with us, yoi, thought Marco sadly, more open with them than with us when he was on our ship all those years ago. Chapter 12. A tensely awkward, semi-amusing dinner. Dinner was a rapid awkward affair for most of the guests. When the guests followed the ASL siblings, Serenity, and Hotaru to the dining room, they didn't know what to expect. What they saw was also not expected as well. As they arrived to their destination, the guests had to stop and stare. There was a long table in the center, Queen Serenity IV being at the head. They saw Serenity skip towards her mother and give her a kiss on the cheek before sitting in the middle of the long table. There, Luffy was quick to sit on Serenity's right while Ace quickly sat on Serenity's left. It became slightly awkward when one of the Whitebeard commanders was about to sit on Ace's other side, only to stop to see Sabo was already situated next to Ace. Hotaru was sitting across from Serenity at the center with Sabo's revolutionary partner, Koala, sitting to Hotaru's left. Shanks was quick to sit on Hotaru's right while Dragon and Garp sat on either side of Queen Serenity IV. Wanting to sit close to their captain, the Strafuts got situated to Shanks and Luffy's right, making room for their friends Vivi, Rebecca, and Shirahoshi to sit next to them. The last three empty spots near the queen were filled by the aforementioned princesses' fathers, leaving the rest of the seats for the Whitebeard commanders, Thatch snatching a seat next to Sabo and near Ace. However, it became nowhere near awkward until conversation started. It is nice of you all to come to this occasion, said a smiling Queen Serenity IV. No way are the red-haired pirates going to miss Anchor's marriage, said Shanks enthusiastically, especially to a princess. I am just glad to finally getting to meet you, piped up Serenity. Same to you, Heim, said Shanks with a big smile on his face. Hi, said King Cobra, who brought the conversation back, arigato for your hospitality and invitation to this. Did you know? Monkey-san saved my kingdom in Alabasta. Not just your kingdom, Cobra-san, said King Neptune, it was the same with mine. My, Luffy-kun, said Queen Serenity IV, does this make you a hero or a pirate? I'm not a hero, said Luffy in a panic, I don't want to share my meat. As Luffy panicked by Queen Serenity IV's statement, Sabo, Ace, Hotaru, and Serenity laughed at Luffy's expense. They knew that Sabo had given a story about what a hero was to Luffy as a child, but the others didn't. The Strafuts had different reactions to their captain's reaction, yet everyone could see that they were all resisting to face palm at what Luffy was doing. Thatch was laughing at Luffy's reaction, however. Ace, your little brother is the best, exclaimed Thatch. I already know that, Thatch, mocked Ace. So, Luffy, said Hotaru teasingly, you're not even going to share your meat with your bride-to-be. Of course, I am, said Luffy, she deserves the best. Luffy, muttered Serenity, who was turning red. You share your meat with her, but what about us, questioned Sabo teasingly. Sabo, I love you, said Luffy, Demo, get your own meat. You can share with your girlfriend Koala. He's not my boyfriend, exclaimed Koala and Sabo, both flushing at the face. Ace was just laughing his butt off while the conversation kept on going. He could hear that his mother in all but blood, Queen Serenity IV, was talking politics and alliances with King Cobra, Dragon, Garp, King Neptune, and King Dold. He could also hear the Strafuts talking to the three princesses about how their countries were faring after they left. Tuning back to the conversation around him, Ace couldn't help but tease Sabo as well. Why do you deny it, dear brother? Questioned Ace. Even an oblivious monkey like our Odoto could see that. Stay out of it, Ace, said Sabo, or I am going to tell Taru Imo about what you said when we were little kids. What thing? Piped in Izo. That's between me and my brother, Izo, said Ace absent-mindedly. Demo, said Fosa, aren't we all brothers? You are still our brother, aren't you, Ace? All conversation, besides the whispers with the adults, stopped as they all tuned into the conversation between the other people. Serenity and Hotaru looked ready for dinner to actually start, yet the cooks haven't come out with the first course yet. They could also feel the tension as Fosa questioned Ace about being their brother still. The two girls looked at each other while Luffy and Sabo quieted down as well. They knew that the Whitebeard pirates made Ace their brother in their crew, but it had been a long time. It was also the time away from the Whitebeard pirates that made Ace contemplate his past decisions as well. Ace, on his part, was staying quiet at Fosa's question until Ace questioned Atmos. Why yeah, said Ace with a hesitant smile, we're still brothers. You don't sound that confident in that answer, Yoi, pointed out Marco. Well, said Ace with an inward wince, can you blame me? We haven't seen each other in years. For all I know, we aren't brothers anymore. Ace, said Hotaru. I know, said Ace with a sigh, talk to Mercury later. Hum Serenity. Mercury, questioned Haruta. I have a lot of issues to work out on, said Ace who looked a bit ashamed. Issues, pressed on Jozu. You don't need to know, said Ace. Demo, Ace, started Thatch. Just drop it, said Ace with a glare. The Whitebeard pirates winced at the glare. It was the same glare that Ace first gave to them before he joined the Whitebeard pirates. Serenity placed her left hand on top of Ace's right hand and gave a gentle squeeze. Serenity and Hotaru knew that Ace went to Mercury for some physical checkups, but it also became mental checkups when Ace started to have nightmares, especially about his death. Luffy and Sabo could tell that Ace was hiding his issues like when he was little, yet they believed that if they were alone, Ace would talk to them just like before. Ace, questioned Hotaru. I'm fine, said Ace before looking around, so, where's the cooks? I'm starving. Same here, piped up Sabo. They delivered the first course while you all were talking animatedly, said Queen Serenity IV with an amused smile. Exclaimed everyone before looking in front of them. No way, said Nami, how did we not notice? I believe you all were concentrating on what is going on with the Whitebeard pirates and Ace-san, answered Dragon. I can't believe we didn't even smell it when it was in front of us, muttered Usopp. Same here, pouted Chopper. Speak for yourself, said Zoro under his breath. With that, dinner became awkward as everyone began to eat. The Whitebeard pirates couldn't help but keep on glancing at Ace who had his fork in a fierce grip. Serenity looked very concerned for Ace, as well as Hotaru. The girls could tell that Ace wanted to stand up and walk away from the dinner table. However, Serenity's mother would never allow that until all three courses were done. Luffy and Sabo looked at each other, nodded, and started to do what they do on MT. Kalubo with the bandits, fight and steal food from each other's plates. Hey, yelled out Ace, that's mine. Not anymore, teased Sabo as he took a bite out of the chicken he stole from Ace's plate. Anchor, yelped out Shanks. All fair when meat is involved, taunted Luffy as he bit into Shanks' meat. Ah, yelped Nami, Frankie. Just following with the flow, said Frankie as he stole Nami's a small piece of food. How dare you steal from Nami-Kwan, yelled out an angry Sanji. Not like the witch wanted that meat anyways, said Zoro nonchalantly. What did you say, Moss Head, growled Sanji. You heard me, number 7, mocked Zoro. It was then that Luffy gathered Serenity into his arms and jumped them away from what came next. Sanji leapt out of his seat and started to use his feet to hit Zoro. However, Zoro was quick to bring out his 3 swords that he had on his person. Dragon, who also saw what Luffy saw, quickly stood in front of Queen Serenity IV to protect her from the fight between 2 of the Strafut pirates. Usopp and Chopper were the only ones who were trying to defuse the fight while Robin looked at the fight in amusement. She could also see that Ace and Sabo were quick to bring Hotaru and Koala to safety when the fight started. It wasn't until Nami lost her temper and hit both Sanji and Zoro's head, making the 2 fall onto the table with a thump. Knock it off, you two, yelled Nami, we're in front of royalty. At least, said Robin, they made the dinner enjoyable instead of the tension, Nami-san. Still, said Nami with a huff. It is fine, said Queen Serenity IV before addressing Dragon, thank you Dragon-san for protecting me. And you as well, Garp, Shanks-san, said King Cobra and King Dold. It is the duty of the Marines to help out, declared Garp. Nonsense, said Shanks nonchalantly, it was the right thing to do. Youngsters these days don't know how to behave. Bah, laughed out Garp, you're still young there, red-haired. Dahahahaha, laughed Shanks, you've got me there, Garp-san. As Garp and Shanks laughed, everyone stared at them. It was such a rare thing to see a pirate and a marine getting along. Though, with how Luffy had a marine friend named Kobe, it wasn't a far-fetched thought as everyone watched on. Queen Serenity IV, however, looked at the destroyed cutlery and plates from the brief fight between Luffy's Nakama and sighed in exasperation. She could see her Senshi doing something like this in the training rooms, but in the dining room. She, however, could see Luffy, Sabo, and Ace looking guilty over something that they started at the table. Well, said Queen Serenity IV, since the table is in ruin, there won't be any dessert. What? Yelped out Luffy, no dessert. I blame you three, said Hotaru with a deadpanned look. I wasn't the one who started the stealing of other people's food, said Ace offended. We weren't the ones who made this dinner awkward and tense, fought back Sabo. So, it's my fault, questioned Ace. And probably the Whitebeard pirates, conceded Sabo. Hey, said an offended Thatch. The brothers looked at the Whitebeard pirates and shrugged at them. They couldn't help that Ace had issues that he was working on. But, for now, it was time to get to how Ace was alive and probably talk about Ace's issues. Maybe Ace will soon talk with his Whitebeard brothers, but until then, those pirates had to wait until Luffy and Sabo had gotten their answers first. They were Ace's brothers first, so, they had priority to get answers out of him. Luffy and Sabo could see Queen Serenity IV dismiss everyone by motioning for the servants to clear the table. With that signal, Luffy used his Gomu Gomu no Mi abilities to wrap his arms around Serenity and Ace before running out of the dining room. Sabo laughed while he escorted Hotaru to where he knew the three would wind up at. Hotaru shook her head at the sight while Sabo and she followed the three out of the dining room. You all, addressed Queen Serenity IV before anyone could follow, I shall let the chefs make dessert and deliver it to your rooms. Arigato, Serenity Jusama, said Marco, however, I believe my fellow crew members and I will just retire. As you wish, said Queen Serenity IV before turning to the others, and yourselves. Dessert sounds nice, said Brook, Demo, I don't have ears to hear. Skull Joe. Knock it off, said Nami as she hit Brook over the head. Ah, said Robin, dessert would be lovely. Then, I shall send someone to deliver you your dessert in your rooms, said Queen Serenity IV with a gentle smile. Later that night. So, how did you survive, questioned Sabo. Luffy, Serenity, Hotaru, Ace, and Sabo were out and about until the five went into the kitchens. There, the chef already had more food prepared for the 2Ds and Sabo while Serenity and Hotaru were smacking on some nighttime dessert. As the five settled around the kitchen counter, Sabo then turned to Ace and reiterated his question from before dinner. Serenity and Luffy also slowed down in eating their food to tune in on the conversation. Well, as I said Ace, it was Hotaru and Mercury who revived me. I don't know the details, but Hotaru can tell it. Me, squeaked out Hotaru. You are the one with powers over the dead, said a deadpanned Ace. Demo, started Hotaru. Come on, Taru-chan, whined Luffy, tell us how you saved Ace. Groaned out Hotaru before huffing, fine. I'll tell you. Yes, exclaimed Luffy, story time. Chapter 13, Hotaru's Tale, Portgas d Ace's Survival. It was a rare day that little Hotaru and little Serenity visited Luffy, Ace, and Sabo on Mt. Kalubo. The caretaker, Curly Dayton, and her bandit gang were surprised to see two little girls arriving with the three troublesome ASL brothers. They didn't know where the little girls came from, but from the looks of it, they would have to watch over the little darlings or else a certain Marine Vice Admiral would be on their tail. The ASL brothers, however, enthusiastically greeted the little girls and, to the surprise of the Dayton bandits, hugged the little girls. Serenity, exclaimed Sabo, Hotaru. Nice of you two to drop by. Mama said that we could visit you, said Serenity. Nodded Hotaru, especially when I'm with Serenity. I'm her personal guard. Personal guard, questioned Ace. Nodded an enthusiastic Serenity, Taru is training to become a sailor Senshi like Venus. Shug, awesome, great, exclaimed Luffy, what powers are you going to have? Serenity Jusama says that I am the soldier of silence, destruction, ruin, and rebirth, said Hotaru. That's a lot of powers, said Sabo with his face becoming a bit paled. Hotaru just shrugged her shoulders. She knew that the other sailor senshi were scared of her powers, but she couldn't help on what her planet powers would represent. She was actually focused on the rebirth part of her powers because she knew that one of these days, the boys would be over their heads and would need her to revive them just so Serenity would not be sad at all. She would protect her Heim, her friend's heart. Yet, for now, she would be the child she should be before learning more of her powers. Come on, said Luffy, let's show Taru-chan and Usagi-chan a hunt. Hunt? Questioned Hotaru. You'll see, said Sabo and Ace together. It was now the afternoon after a hunting adventure. Luffy, however, was trying to cheer up Serenity because he got eaten by a crocodile, again. That scared Hotaru and Serenity, but mostly Serenity because she thought Luffy died after being eaten. Ace and Sabo sighed in unison as they beat the crocodile before opening up the stomach to let Luffy out. Hotaru and Serenity were in shocked horror that Ace and Sabo weren't that concerned and looked like this happened a lot. So, after eating the crocodile, Luffy was hugging Serenity a lot to reassure that he was indeed alive and was trying to make her happy. That's what you get for not listening to us, Lu, said Sabo. Gomen, whined Luffy to Serenity, Onagai. Don't be mad at me. Don't annoy Sarah because you didn't listen to your Onachan, Lu, said an agitated Ace. Speaking of Onachan, piped up Hotaru, how are you three brothers? You three don't even the same name. We never told you, questioned Sabo. Told us what? Questioned Serenity who was still ignoring a pouting Luffy. I guess if we never did, said Ace who wasn't answering Serenity's question, then, we just have to demonstrate. Demonstrate what? Questioned Hotaru. Nothing was ever explained to the two girls, until late at night. Serenity and Hotaru were having a sleepover with the brothers because Serenity begged her mother to let Hotaru and her to stay with the boys for a night. Yet, since they were little, Serenity and Hotaru weren't used to staying up late at night. They were woken up by the three boys and randomly dragged towards a stump of a tree that had 5 sake cups. The girls were even more confused as Ace then produced a sake bottle from a hidden place and smirked at the girls. Did you know, questioned Ace, if you share a drink, you can become brothers? That's how you became brothers, questioned an incredulous Hotaru. Yup, said Sabo while Luffy laughed gleefully. So, why do you have sake cups and a sake bottle if you could just tell us, questioned Hotaru, Serenity still sleepily rubbing her eyes to wipe the sleep from her eyes. Did you know, repeated Ace before changing the end to the question, if you share a drink, you can become siblings. I'm not drinking a cup with Usagi-chan, exclaimed Luffy into the night and with a pout, we're to be more than siblings. We know that, Lu, said Sabo, Demo, don't you want to be siblings with Hotaru? Yeah, said an enthusiastic Luffy, so, does this mean we are going to exchange more than one cup? Well, how else are we going to become siblings with Serenity and Hotaru while you and Serenity don't share one to become siblings, questioned Ace. So, with the plan in motion, Ace, Sabo, and Luffy became siblings separately with Hotaru and Serenity on this quiet night. The children, however, would not know that the bonds they created through this one significant night would ignite something within Hotaru when Serenity and Hotaru were 16 years old. The day of Ace's death. Ah! Yelled out Hotaru as she sank to her knees and gripped her shirt where her heart was. Hotaru and Serenity were walking towards the training room until Hotaru's heart started to burn. That burning sensation led to her trying to heal her so-called heart through her innate healing powers. However, it didn't stop the burning as it led to a brighter lavender color and Serenity trying to get through to Hotaru by yelling at her on what was going on. It wasn't long that the Senshi and Serenity were helpless to watch Hotaru disappear through said lavender light, leaving the Senshi and Serenity in confusion and worry. Hotaru, however, was transported to an unknown lavender void, floating and wincing once in a while from the burning sensation. Hotaru, whispered a female voice. D-W who questioned Hotaru. Hotaru, whispered a female voice, it is time to awaken once more. Oh once more, questioned Hotaru, W what do you mean? W who are you? Hotaru, who was now panicking within void, tried to find the female voice. A soft darkish lavender light shone in front of Hotaru's eyes. That light that was shining became a bit brighter before a transparent and older sailor Saturn appeared right before Hotaru's eyes. Hotaru widened her eyes as she saw the apparition of her so-called sailor Senshi self. Hotaru tried to get away from the apparition, but because she was floating in a void, she couldn't really maneuver well. The apparition, however, floated more closely to Hotaru before speaking in a soft tone. Tomo Hotaru, said the apparition, it is time to awaken. As I asked, said Hotaru who was still trying to hide her wince, who are you? I am your protector, said the apparition. Mine, questioned Hotaru. Hi, said the apparition, I have come to awaken your Saturn powers in hopes to save your brother. Brother, questioned Hotaru, you mean Luffy? Said the apparition, your other brother, Ace. Ace, exclaimed Hotaru, what's wrong with him? Why awaken my powers early? Due to the creation of the sibling bond from long ago, said the apparition, it has alerted your Saturnian powers to the dangers and certain death of a certain brother. That is why I have come to awaken your Saturn powers in hopes to save your brother's soul before it moves on into the afterlife. The sibling bond, murmured Hotaru, is that what I am feeling? Hi, said the apparition. With that said, the apparition had a soft, glowing light purple orb on its index finger before placing it gently onto Hotaru's forehead. Hotaru scrunched up her nose slightly as she felt powers flowing through her, opening more knowledge on how to use her powers. She also didn't notice her eyes closing when said index finger was touching her forehead until she opened her eyes to find herself alone in the void. Wincing more, Hotaru knew that she couldn't really stay wherever this void was and concentrated on the sibling bond that she formed with the ASL brothers when she was a little girl. Hotaru, within her mind, saw 4 strings, yet one was very close to breaking. She couldn't really ponder on just why she has 4 intact strings, yet she just knew instinctively that she should follow the almost broken string to Ace. Huh, muttered Hotaru, my protector gave me instant knowledge on knowing how to use my Saturn powers. Helpful, I think. Not wasting any more time, Hotaru disappeared in her lavender light, following one of her sibling bonds towards Ace and hoping she wasn't too late in saving him. Present day. Then, I found myself on top of a hill that had 2 stones for a grave, said Hotaru, I just knew that I had to get Ace's body out before going back to the kingdom. Ace, Serenity, Luffy, and Sabo all stared at Hotaru as she finished one part of how Ace was alive to this day. Serenity didn't even know that when Hotaru disappeared, she was meeting her protector, her guardian Saturn. Ace, Sabo, and Luffy were enthralled that when they did that sibling bond through sake as children, they didn't realize that they actually formed an actual bond that Hotaru now could feel with her powers. Good thing too, or else Ace would have been gone thoroughly to the other side. So, that's why you had Ace when you came back from, well, I guess the void that you met with Guardian Saturn, said Serenity. Nodded Hotaru, though, it was a pain to use the sibling bond to tell Ace that it wasn't his time to go. That was you, blurted out Ace, I thought I was hallucinating that. Well, now you know that it was Emmy who was trying to get through to you, sassed back Hotaru. Demo, said Ace, why did you call me Heiken no Ace? I was still new to the powers, said Hotaru with a flushing face, I had to have the Guardian Saturn take over some when trying to get through to your very soul. His soul, questioned Sabo. Said Hotaru, after getting Ace's body, Mercury took over and fixing up his body while I used Saturn's powers to call his soul back from going into the afterlife. From what my powers were telling me, his soul was drifting between moving on or staying anchored to his body. Wow, exclaimed Luffy, Ace. You owe Hotaru a lot for saving you in limbo. I know, Lou, said Ace with a soft expression on his face, I know. Ace gave a grateful look to Hotaru. Without her Saturnian powers, he would have been drifting until he went to the afterlife. Serenity was also grateful to Hotaru as well and hoped that when it was time for her to actually gain the Ginzuisho's power, she would be just as powerful in saving lives like Hotaru did with Ace. Sabo got off of his seat and proceeded to hug the life out of Hotaru. Arigato, said Sabo earnestly. Well, someone has to make sure you 3 don't die on as sisters, mocked Hotaru. So, agreed Serenity, you made us sisters worry about you all a lot. And, said Hotaru, we feel that you all need retribution for that. Didn't you get that when you chased us around the courtyard, whined Luffy. Didn't you get that when I was in rehab with Mercury, whined Ace. Serenity didn't, pointed out Hotaru, and I still feel vexed on what you all have done to our hearts. Sabo just sighed in resignation. It was no use to argue with Hotaru once she sets her mind on a goal. This time it's punishment for the ASL brothers. Sabo looked out into the night sky and hoped that tomorrow brought the brothers a lighter punishment for scaring the girls than what Hotaru might have in mind. The next day. Chapter 14. Hectic morning with a repeated incident. Every pirate guest that was sleeping in the palace woke up to a new morning by a knock on their doors. Bleary eyes opened up to the constant knocking on the door. With the Strafut boys, Sanji swooned at who was on the other side of the door while the rest wondered why they were woken up by a senshi. This senshi who was wearing teal blue colors and having pink hair tied up in 2 curly pigtails was waiting for the Strafuts with crossed arms. Nami glared at the senshi for the constant knocking, yet Robin held Nami back. Said senshi told the Strafuts to follow her for breakfast before walking down the hallway with the clicks of her teal blue heels. The Strafuts, who promptly followed the Senshi, was met up by the Whitebeard pirates and another Senshi. This Senshi looked similar to the one leading the Strafuts, but she was wearing soft pink instead of teal blue. Lethe, said the other Senshi. Mnemosyne, said the now known Lethe. I hope you haven't been too hard on them, Lethe, said Mnemosyne softly. They are harder to get up, said Lethe, besides, we have to mind the river soon. We do not want another incident with Luffy-sama again. That's true, said Mnemosyne with a giggle. Dashite White questioned Usopp, what happened? Luffy-sama, at 10, got too close to the desert river of oblivion, explained Lethe. Mnemosyne herself had to use her powers to restore his memories afterwards. What is the desert river of oblivion? Questioned Zoro. It is a river that has the powers to make people lose their memories and forget everything, explained Mnemosyne. Everyone winced when they heard what that kind of river did to a person. They all wondered why a kingdom would have such a river, but they didn't want to voice anything out. It was Haruta who joked that they should capture Blackbeard and dunk him into the river. The other Whitebeard pirates chuckled dark humorously as they thought about that traitorous person who started it all. However, Lethe told them that no outsiders could come uninvited, even if they had good intentions. The other sailors Senshi will believe that they were under attack and attack the outsiders, even if they had that kind of suggestion. We do not pollute the river, chided Lethe. Yo-ho-ho-ho, laughed Brook, who brought them all back to what happened to Luffy. I guess Luffy-san has been rambunctious since young to get into mischief like that. He made Serenity Himisama cry so much for that incident, said Mnemosyne, though, he still proclaimed that she was his to marry, even with most of his memories regressed before meeting her. That's our captain, said a proud Zoro. The Strafuts had bemused looks on their faces as they remembered what Lethe and Mnemosyne said about Luffy's past adventure. Lethe, though aggressive, told them that they now had to diligently guard the desert river of oblivion because Luffy was most likely going to fall into the river, again. The Strafuts nodded their heads because that was what Luffy would do, even if he is 22 years old. Ace's little brother is a riot, laughed Thatch. You should have seen him on that battlefield though, said Jozu, he was so serious looking. Well, a loved one who is precious to them will fight for said loved one with all that he or she has, said another female voice. Everyone jumped before turning to see another Senshi there. This one had dark brown hair and a short bob and was wearing a mixture of brown and yellow. Lethe nodded her head to the newest Senshi while Mnemosyne hugged said Senshi. Every pirate wondered why this newest Senshi came, yet they didn't have to wait long for said Senshi to tell them the reason why. Lethe, Mnemosyne, said the Senshi, Serenity Jusama would like you to go back to your duties. I'll bring these pirates to the breakfast hall. Arigato, Astarte, said Lethe. Wait a minute, said Nami, why can't they finish bringing us to the breakfast hall? You questioning our queen's commands, growled out Lethe. Said Nami, who laughed nervously, I just mean that we're close to the breakfast hall. I'm sure you can wait a moment to go back to your duties to show us the hall. If you want your captain to lose more memories, said the now known Astarte, by all means, let Lethe and Mnemosyne not continue their duties. Exclaimed everyone. Lethe and Mnemosyne sighed in unison before swiftly leaving the group. Astarte was about to continue the walk to the breakfast hall, but hearing that their captain was losing memories, the Strafuts quickly followed Lethe and Mnemosyne. That didn't sit well with the Whitebeard pirates as they too believed Ace was with them and would probably fall into the river as well. That thinking prompted the Whitebeards to rush after the Strafuts, leaving Astarte alone in the hall. Well, I can report that they do care for Luffy-sama and Ace-sama, muttered Astarte. Muttering to yourself again, Astarte, questioned an amused female. You would too if you were left alone, Sailor Buttress, said Astarte back. As Astarte was now accompanied by Buttress, the Strafuts and the Whitebeards were quick to follow Lethe and Mnemosyne to another hallway. They could hear voices in one of the rooms. Once there, all of the pirates stopped at the doorway to see what looked like a hurricane hitting the massive room. The pirates were also gaping at how the so-called room looked more like an outdoor forest instead of an actual room. There was even a daytime sky on the ceiling, and was that a fresh air breeze? They, however, turned to the constant gomons coming from Serenity's mouth as Sabo tried to comfort Serenity. What is going on in here? Questioned everyone. Oh, said Lethe with a scowl, you followed us. Of course, we did, said Frankie, we heard our captain was losing memories and wanted to make sure everything was fine. So, Senshi-san, said Robin, Luffy Shusho is quite precious to us Strafuts. I see, said Lethe, well, to inform you, Hotaru, Serenity Haim, Luffy-sama, Ace-sama, and Sabo-sama were training in here once more. However, this training room also has the desert river of oblivion running through the waters like all training rooms do. Why would that be running through a training room? Questioned Chopper. For training, duh, said Lethe, we Senshi take our duties seriously. That means, we take our training seriously. It is a good thing that Mnemosyne is always on standby if something like this points to Luffy and Mnemosyne happens to us. Mnemosyne doesn't participate, questioned Fosa. Said Lethe, my sister is a passive. She abhors violence and will try to settle things peacefully. I'm the opposite of her. I see, said Namur. As Lethe explained what Mnemosyne was doing to Luffy, Mnemosyne was almost done restoring Luffy's memories. She sighed inwardly at what happened to Luffy again. At least, she got the full story about how Hotaru and Serenity were punishing the ASL brothers for worrying the two girls. That, however, led to Serenity accidentally sending Luffy into the river, leading to Ace going in after Luffy. Ace, too, had to be subjected to her powers as well, for he only forgotten yesterday's events after saving Luffy from drowning in the river. She was just glad that Ace only lost one event while Luffy kept on trying to go back into the river, thus erasing more memories. There, said Mnemosyne, that should do it. Questioned Luffy, why is USA-chan crying? She threw her attack at you during training, making you accidentally falling backwards into the desert river of oblivion, explained Sabo. You, however, kept on going back into the river because, well, I don't know why you did that, Lu. Warui, laughed Luffy who grabbed Serenity and hugged her, Don't worry, USA-chan. I'm all better thanks to Mnemosyne. Demo, sniffed Serenity. No more tears, said Luffy sternly and with a pout, it was an accident. Though, we probably shouldn't have trained very close to the river. That's hindsight for you, sighed Hotaru. Said Luffy before looking behind Hotaru. You guys are here. Oblivious, chorused the Strafuts. Ace, Sabo, Hotaru, and Serenity also turned towards the door to see the Whitebeards and the Strafuts there. They too didn't know when the crowd formed, and at the doorway too. Ace still felt a bit nervous around his former nakama, but a reassured look from his family got him to press forward. Draping an arm around Hotaru and Sabo's shoulders, Ace all but proclaimed that he is hungry after all that workout. He also complimented that Hotaru was getting better with her accuracy with her glaive. Hotaru, on her part, knew that Ace was trying to distract himself and started to add her comments. She too complimented Serenity on her disc throwing, leading to Luffy proudly proclaiming, that's my fiancé. Though, said Ace with a smirk, I heard that a certain Boa Hancock wants to marry you, Lu. Sabo, whined Luffy. Hey, said Sabo, you told me not to tell Sarah Imoto, not the other two. So, who is this Boa Hancock? Questioned Hotaru, do I need a new target to practice on for trying to hurt Sarah-chan? As the siblings walked out and towards the breakfast hall, the Strafuts and Whitebeards were quick to follow. Robin and Marco, though, turned and bowed to the two Senshi and thanks for leading them thus far and being with the group before departing. The two could see the Strafuts listening and making comments about Boa Hancock while the Whitebeards were trying, and failing, to communicate with Ace. It seemed like it was like before Ace joined the Whitebeards. Ace was giving the Whitebeard pirates the cold shoulder while looking around sharply for any danger. Should I be jealous, Lu-kun? Questioned Serenity. Shouted a desperate Luffy, you know you were the only one for me. Since he was 7, piped up Sabo. Yeah, Imoto, said Ace, so, stop teasing Lu about that woman's crush. Besides, Boa is so old for Luffy. I don't even know how she got a crush on him. Demo, said Izo, isn't Boa Hancock considered the most beautiful woman in the world? Thank you, Izo, said a sarcastic Ace before turning to Serenity, don't listen to that buffoon, Imoto. And, said Sabo, I can vouch for Lu that he has never once considered any other girl to marry besides you. While Luffy glared harshly at Izo for that question, Sabo and Ace were making sure Serenity didn't fall into depression. The brothers knew unconsciously that Serenity had some self-esteem issues due to seeing the beautiful girls that had a crush on Luffy after he saved them. The saving grace was Nami and Robin who also vouched that Luffy not once ogled at other girls while on his adventure. They pointed out that the only who would do that was Sanji who did that every single time. That prompted Sanji to fall into depression before swiftly trying to kick Zoro for a brazen comment Zoro made. Everyone else was laughing right when they arrived at the breakfast hall. Finally, said Queen Serenity IV. Gomen, Kassan, said Ace sheepishly, we had to wait for Mnemosyne. Oh, questioned Queen Serenity IV, don't tell me Luffy-kun fell into the river again. He did, said Hotaru, but, he was trying to dodge Sarah-chan's attack. You were practicing, Masumi daughter, questioned Queen Serenity IV. Nodded Serenity. Practicing what? Questioned Shanks who was already seated at the table with Garp, Dragon, and the other royals from last night. Being a senshi, piped the ASL brothers proudly. Exclaimed everyone who was near the 5 siblings. At Marineford, Tosin, said a male voice. Ah, Mamoru-kun, said another male voice. I think, started the first male with hesitancy, I think I remember my past life. Oh, questioned the second male, intrigued, please enlighten me, my dear Masuko. Chapter 15, Therapy leads to an uncomfortable info. Well, that's all for today, Ace-san, said Mercury. Ace nodded at the short, dark blue-haired and blue-eyed Senshi. It was the afternoon, and Ace disappeared from everyone's view. Only Hotaru and Serenity knew where Ace disappeared to as they hung out with Luffy, his nakama, and Sabo. He knew that his old crewmates were wandering around the castle and trying to catch him to interrogate him. Ace was not looking forward to that as he stepped out of his therapy session with Mercury. Looking at another's perspective on what Whitebeard did when he kidnapped him and refused his refusal about being his son, he could tell that Mercury was itching to inform his cousin in all but blood. Though, he did reassured Mercury that he had good memories as well on the ship before the traitor ruined it, leading into his death. Ace shivered inwardly at his death before being started. A good session, questioned Serenity. How did you get away from Lu, questioned Ace. Sabo and Hotaru distracting him by making him tell stories of his childhood to his nakama, said Serenity. He still didn't tell them anything about his childhood, questioned an incredulous Ace. You betcha, said Serenity with a nod, I believe his nakama is enthralled by his storytelling. Though, when I left, Sabo was correcting some of his stories. That's Lu alright, chuckled Ace. Anyways, you didn't answer my question, Nissan, said Serenity. Well, sighed Ace, we talked about the time before I joined Whitebeard's crew. He's not Pops, questioned Serenity. I started Ace before sighing. Mercury said that I may have developed something called Stockholm Syndrome on the ship. Stockholm Syndrome, questioned Serenity. Nodded Ace, according to Mercury, it's a condition in which hostages develop a psychological bond with their captors during captivity. I'm not sure if the others also have this when they joined up with Whitebeard. Serenity looked worried at Ace as he looked drained. Well, therapy could be draining, but she thought that they were only talking about Ace's death. Yet to be fair, his death was caused by a former Whitebeard pirate. Maybe that's why Ace didn't want to get confronted by his former crewmates. Serenity pondered at that while also questioning Ace on what Mercury was going to do with that information. She asked me if she could tell Cassin about it, said Ace sheepishly. As she should, said Serenity, Cassin also has the right to know what this Whitebeard did to you. I know, said Ace, I just don't want her to go off at the Whitebeard pirates that Lu invited for the wedding. I'm sure she won't, said Serenity. Anyways, said Ace who wanted to change the topic, why were you waiting for me? You never did that before. We're going to show Luffy's nakama and anyone else around the shops on the island. With Lu, said Ace, something is bound to happen. True, laughed Serenity as she linked her arm with Ace's, so, shall we? We shall, said Ace who felt better with Serenity with him. With Garp. Garp, yelled out a male voice over the Den Den Mushi. Senny, exclaimed Garp back. That afternoon, Garp took the time to call the military so that they would know he was still alive. He didn't want his best friend, Sengoku, to believe he was dead somewhere. He also didn't need his friend to try to find him and end up going in circles due to the magic within the Silver Moon Kingdom Island. Sengoku, on his part, sighed out. He was looking over what Garp wrote about having vacation time and bringing along the two recruits, Kobe and Helmeppo. He was sure his friend was doing something reckless as always. Your vacation time wasn't scheduled until next week, said Sengoku. Well, said Garp with a sweat drop, I took the week early. Then, are you coming back a week early, too? Asked a skeptical Sengoku. Wahahaha, laughed Garp, we'll see, Senny. Just at least tell me where you are, said Sengoku, the fleet admiral insists to know where you are. Garp paused at that. Even though he was with the Marines, Queen Serenity IV knew that something was going to be amiss and took measures to ensure that no one, besides those invited, were in the known about her island. When Garp first arrived to know about her island, she gave the bare minimum to the Marine headquarters while magically encasing Garp about the actual knowledge of her home, the magic making it so that Garp couldn't give out any important information. She, of course, did this because of his relations to her darling Masumi's fiancé. While he could not tell them about the special event, he could still tell them where he was. Ah, said Garp, I'm visiting Queen Serenity IV. Queen Serenity IV, murmured Sengoku before, you mean that island that comes and goes as it pleases? Yup, said Garp, you know Queen Serenity IV became a dear friend of mine. I'm just checking up on her and how her island is doing. The Celestial Dragons still want to know if they can establish a building there, hummed Sengoku. My friend will never go for it, said Garp, she doesn't really like what the Celestial Dragons are doing as a whole, too. And the fact that the island cannon will disappear off the face of the map, said Sengoku. Garp just nodded his head. He heard from Queen Serenity IV herself that she would never let any celestial dragons come onto her island and desecrate it with their bad deeds. This also included the time they actually shot and metaphorically killed Sabo when he was just a little boy. Before Garp could agree with Sengoku, a knock on the door signaled that someone was about to enter. "Come in," said Garp. "Come in," questioned Sengoku before he heard. "Garp-sama," said a female voice, "Serenity Jusama would like a word with you about the war." "Ah," said Garp, "I'll be there shortly." Turns to the Den Mushi, "Gotta go, Seni. I'll see you in HQ in a month. Maybe two." "Two?" questioned a frustrated Sengoku. "Now wait, just a. Let's go, sailor, started Garp, who was confused on who was before him when he hung up on Sengoku. "Sailor Mao, Garp-sama," said the Senshi. "Right," said Garp, "lead the way, Sailor Mao. With ASL and company." "Turao," shouted Luffy in excitement. It took a while to gather everyone, but they finally got to head out of the palace. Luffy had his arm around Serenity's shoulders, making Sanji internally glare. He still couldn't believe that Luffy snagged a princess for a fiancé. Ace was at Serenity's back, looking out for any danger. Hey, even if he was technically off for the day didn't mean he was going to stop guarding one of his beloved Imoto. Hotaru was the same as she too looked on in alert. Sabo was at Luffy's back while Luffy's nakama, which also included Vivi, her best friend and guard Koza, Rebecca, and Shirahoshi, surrounded the five. It left the Whitebeard pirates to either talk over Luffy's nakama or with them. Though, once they got into town, they could see the pirates who were invited actually behaving. Yet, it could also be the fact that they could somehow see some Senshi on top of roofs and on the lookout. That didn't stop Luffy from spotting Trafalgar Law and his nakama. "Strafutya," said Law, a twitch in his left eye at the nickname. "This is my fiancé, Usagi," exclaimed Luffy. "It's actually Serenity, Demo. Luffy is the only one who calls me Usagi," said Serenity with a smile. "It is nice to meet you, Haim," said Law with a bow. "To popular beliefs, my name is not Turao. It is Trafalgar Law. Though, I have to wonder. However did Luffy get a girl like you to agree to marry him?" "That's what I would like to know," exclaimed Sanji. "Don't mind the cook," said Zoro with a bored expression on his face. He still can't believe that these two are getting married. "Even I can't fathom how you got her, Luffy-san," said Koza. "I was quick to claim her," exclaimed Luffy with a wide smile. "We told you not to make her an object," said Sabo as Ace hit the top of Luffy's head. "Itai," exclaimed Luffy, who held his head. "That's what you get for making Serenity sound like an object, Lu," said Ace. "Heiken number Ace," questioned Law in surprise. "I thought you died." "My death was overly exaggerated," said Ace, who didn't want to go into details yet. "Anyways," said Serenity, "would you like to join us, Law-san?" Law nodded his head in agreement. It was best to know the layout of the island by someone informative. What better way to know than the princess herself? As Serenity and Hotaru spotted Beppo, Law's polar bear mink and nakama, both rushed at him and started to cuddle and pet him. Beppo was turning red as he got attention by two beautiful girls. Luffy, however, pouted when Serenity went to hug Beppo instead of staying in his arms. "Usagi," whined Luffy, "I wanted to hold you more. But, he's just so cute," said Serenity. Agreed Hotaru, "we would have done this to Chopper as well, but the timing was wrong." "In fact," said Serenity as she rushed back and snagged the small reindeer, hugging him to her chest, "Chopper needs some snuggles too." "Mo," pouted Luffy. "Don't get jealous now, Lu," snickered Ace. "Yeah," said Sabo, "you know Serenity loves you." Luffy just huffed at the teasing before pulling Serenity back into his arms. He'll, however, just let Chopper stay in Serenity's arms because that was what was making Serenity smile more. Though, once they all had gotten to the actual market, Luffy plucked Chopper out of Serenity's arms before rocketing away with her to somewhere. Sabo sighed as he jumped onto the roof and raced ahead to make sure Luffy didn't cause too much damage. Ace was about to follow, but his arm was stopped by Marco. Ace was about to look for Hotaru for some sort of pillar of support, yet he just realized that Hotaru went ahead with Luffy's nakama and showed them around the market. "Please let go, Marco," said Ace. "EA," said Marco, "we need to talk, Yoi." "Yeah," said Thatch. "About what?" questioned Ace. "About why you are avoiding us," said Izo. "I am not avoiding you," said Ace. "Now, let go. I still have a duty to follow." "Not until you tell us why you are avoiding us," said Haruta. Agreed Vista, "You are avoiding us, your brothers, and we want to know why." "Why you?" stuttered Ace before glaring at them all in an icy way. "You are not my brothers." That statement made the Whitebeard pirates jerk back. They knew that they were all brothers. The Whitebeard mark symbolized that, yet they also realized Ace doesn't even have that symbol anymore. It was another symbol that indicated he was no longer a Whitebeard pirate. Ace, on the other hand, winced inwardly. He knew that he had hurt his former crew, but he also knew that they weren't brothers anymore, right? He died that day, but was revived anew as Serenity's personal guard. Sure, he wasn't the best, yet who would when they died violently and was brought back to life? Also, with being diagnosed with a slight form of Stockholm Syndrome by Mercury, Ace didn't know how to interact with the Whitebeard pirates anymore. Well, said Ace abashedly, it's true. I'm not your brother anymore. I died. That Ace you knew is dead. Yet, we can still be friends, if that's alright. Friends, echoed Jozu. Friends, said Ace, not elaborating anymore. Anyways, I have to go. I'm still a guard. With that, Ace quickly rushed away from the Whitebeard pirates. He knew that he screwed up with that conversation, yet he also hoped that they were still friends. He just needs to bring everything into perspective for himself before he could really interact with them normally. Though, he could practically hear Hotaru and Serenity scolding him for leaving like that without really explaining anything to the Whitebeard pirates. Wincing at that imagery, Ace caught up with Sabo as both finally found Luffy and Serenity, at a restaurant. Ace never once looked back to see the conflicting emotions in his former crew. Friends, parroted Thatch. Did none of our time together matter to Ace? Questioned King Du. I bet Ace is brainwashed or something, said Thatch. No way would he not consider us brothers after everything we've all went through as Whitebeard pirates. Also, did you hear his stutter before he said that statement? Pointed out Fosa. So, we are accusing the Queen for doing something? Questioned a perplexed Namur. Said Marco, we just have to corner Ace and get him to explain to us, yoi. This should be fun, muttered Atmos, cornering Ace while he has a valid excuse to be away from us. Excuse? Questioned Curiel. Remember, said Atmos, he's still the personal guard for the Heim. So, we need the Heim to still be protected if we want to talk to Ace by himself. Then, that's what we'll do, said Marco, we need answers from Ace. So, let's make sure the Heim is protected while getting Ace by himself, yoi. Ryokai, said the commanders. I mean, said Thatch, how hard can it be to get the Heim to be protected while getting Ace all on his lonesome self? Chapter 16, The Issue, Ace's Therapy Session. I mean, said Thatch, how hard can it be to get the Heim to be protected while getting Ace all on his lonesome self? How hard can it be to get the Heim to be protected while getting Ace all on his lonesome self? Mocked Haruta before glaring at Thatch, you just had to jinx us. It was a couple of days after the confrontation with Ace that the Whitebeard pirates were having a difficult time in cornering Ace to talk to him again. Then again, the Heim wasn't as protected whenever most, if not all, of the guests for the wedding decided to stop at another island to walk around. There, they saw that Ace was most protective of the Heim as some males kept on leering at her. It also didn't help that the Heim would be kidnapped by slave traders whenever they ran into some because of the Heim's unique looks. Luffy didn't help matters as well when they went to a different island by pulling the Heim with him, Ace, Hotaru, and Sabo rushing after the couple for supervision. Okay, said Thatch, my bad. Yet, how was I supposed to know that the Heim was a danger magnet? The fact that she's a Heim, questioned Rikuyo with a deadpanned look. How is it our luck that we always bump into a slave trader on one other island, questioned Blamenko. It's just our rotten, bad luck, yoi, said Marco. As the Whitebeards were conversing, Ace and his siblings in all but blood were conversing as well. Sabo had a deadpanned look while Luffy was just confused. The brothers didn't understand why Ace would say the Whitebeard pirates were not his brothers, his second family away from his first one. They didn't understand what went on in his therapy sessions. Hotaru, however, was glaring at Ace for how he handled that one confrontation with his former crew. She knew Ace wasn't a part of the Whitebeards anymore because of that symbol on his back, yet she also knew that how Ace handled that confrontation was horrific. She should have just stayed with Ace, yet she knew that wouldn't have changed the outcome much. Serenity just looked at Ace sadly while being held by Luffy. All of them were in a private sitting room that was only access to them and those living within the kingdom, aka the Senshi. Why did Ace say that the Whitebeards were only friends? Questioned Luffy, aren't they family? I heard they call themselves brothers like us and consider Ace as one. Ace is just a baka idiot, Lu, said Sabo with a deadpanned look. I am not, said Ace with a scowl. Then, why aren't you hanging out with your former crew and getting to know them again? Fired back Sabo. It's just awkward, said Ace. That's because you make it awkward, pointed out Sabo. Serenity and Hotaru looked on as Sabo and Ace started to argue about what happened. Luffy was still confused on why Ace didn't want to be brothers with the Whitebeards anymore. He really wanted to get an answer on his question, yet Sabo called Ace a baka, the same insult that Ace and Sabo uses on him sometimes. Hotaru then swung her glaive in the middle of the arguing brothers, making the two jump back and fists flaring with fire. Sheesh, Hotaru, said Ace, close much. Your arguing is only making Luffy confused, said Hotaru. Do you know why Ace did what he did, questioned Luffy. Ace has to explain, said Serenity. Demo, he's not even telling us, pouted Luffy with a whine to his tone. It's his story to tell, said Hotaru, who only looked at Ace expectantly. Ace winced as he thought about his therapy session with Mercury. He knew that his brothers needed to learn what Mercury may have diagnosed him with. Come to think of it, Hotaru needed to learn about that as well. The only person who knew what Mercury said about his diagnostic was Serenity, and she certainly wasn't telling them anything without Ace's consent. With a sigh, Ace looked at his support system, his siblings, with trepidation before opening his mouth and recounting his latest therapy session. Flashback. So, we stopped at you telling me about your 5-day battle with A, said Mercury as she looked at her notes. Hi, a certain fishman warlord. Yup, said Ace, that's Jinbei. It was another day of therapy for a certain fire guard with a certain Senshi. He knew that he told Mercury about his issues with a certain pirate king and his formation of the Spade Pirates. He, however, had to stop at his 5-day battle with Jinbei before heading out to do his job, which wasn't really a job for him due to the job being surrounded by a certain Imoto. Mercury, on that last therapy session, did suggest to go to Hotaru, aka Saturn, and to have her try to summon his actual father to talk with him. He did admit to Mercury in this therapy session that he didn't get around to asking Hotaru about summoning his dead dad or his dead mom, now that he thought about it. Mercury just smiled reassuringly as she started to talk about where they left off from the other therapy session. Now, tell me what happened afterwards, said Mercury. Jinbei and I actually became friends after that battle, said Ace, though, last I saw of him was at Impel Down. Which we will go over another time, said Mercury. Demo, tell me what happened after your recent friendship with Jinbei. If I remember correctly, said Ace, the Moby Dick surfaced near the island Jinbei and I were fighting on. Ace then started to tell Mercury on how the commanders of the Whitebeards came onto the island and started to fight him. He threw up a firewall to protect his crew members from the additional people that came. However, he was so tired and hungry that he fainted onto the ground and was dragged onto the Moby Dick. There, Ace told Mercury about waking up and being greeted by Whitebeard himself. Whitebeard then asked him if he would become one of his sons, which he vehemently refused and threatened to kill Whitebeard so his name would be famous around the world. Mercury just hummed as her eyebrows furrowed at what Ace said when he refused the first time to join the Whitebeards. Once Ace told her that months passed and he slowly accepted to joining the Whitebeards as a son, Mercury frowned more. Mercury, questioned Ace, what's with that frown? Ace, questioned Mercury, have you ever heard of Stockholm Syndrome? Stockholm Syndrome, questioned Ace slowly. Nodded Mercury, you told me that you refused countless of times to joining Whitebeard until a certain point. You, along with your Spade Pirates crew members, were on the Moby Dick without any form of escape in sight for months. And, pressed on Ace in trepidation. Stockholm Syndrome, said Mercury, is a condition in which hostages develop a psychological bond with their captors during captivity. This results come from a rather specific set of circumstances, namely the power imbalances contained in hostage-taking or, in your case, kidnapping. Ace paused at the information Mercury gave him and thought back to the days before agreeing to being Whitebeard's son. He saw himself a bit angry at being kidnapped and asking again for a way to get off of the Moby Dick. Everyone on that ship told him that any civilization were months away. They told him that the waters were rough and in no condition to get off of the ship until everyone reached a civilized island. Clenching a hand into a fist, Ace could see how he was being manipulated and staying. The fact that the commanders also told him that his Spade Pirates were also on board the ship but in a different ship close to the Moby Dick, but away from him, showed that he was being manipulated badly. I guess I can see that, confessed Ace. I would also bet that your Spade Pirates also have a slight form of Stockholm Syndrome due to this, said Mercury. Demo, said Ace, life on the Moby Dick wasn't all that bad. I am not saying that your good memories weren't there, Ace-san, said Mercury with a hand out, I am just looking at that particular part in your story. You already know you have PTSD due to the war that we will be discussing later. Demo, there are a lot of issues within you that had started since you were very young. That is why we are going through every experience you had, childhood and after. I get it, Doc, said Ace, so, what do I do? I would suggest that you try to come to terms in having slight Stockholm Syndrome due to that one incident, said Mercury. Demo, also look on the bright side of your life on the Moby Dick, such as your friends. I mean, after all this time, you would still want to have your friends in the Whitebeards, nay. Hi, said Ace with a shaky breath. I didn't mean to alarm you, said Mercury with a frown. Said Ace, I know I need to go through my issues. That you do, said Mercury. I'm surprised you bottled a lot of things up, Ace-san. Ace just shrugged his shoulders. He always was the one to bottle things up, yet if he was really upset, Luffy, Serenity, or Hotaru would always coax him into talking, especially within their childhood. Heck, he even talked about Sabo's death with Hotaru and cried on her shoulders during that trying time. Ace rubbed the back of his neck as he tuned back in on the conversation. With this new issue, said Mercury, I believe we should stop here until later. Though with this new issue, would it be alright to tell Serenity Jusama about this? She is, after all, your cousin. Hi, said Ace before frowning, you don't think she'll throw the Whitebeards out with this, do you? I think she will rein in her anger, said Mercury slowly with a thoughtful look. Demo, I also think that she'll summon Saturn to summon Whitebeard and lay one on him, so to speak. For all I know, I'll be there and be the one to lay one on him as well. This is very serious. Just because you seem to have a dark outlook doesn't mean this person may or may not have jumped to conclusions that you don't have light in your life and proceeded to cut you off from that light, such as your spade pirates. Should I also bring my former spade pirates to you, questioned Ace. If you think that is best, said Mercury. Demo, they also have the right to refuse this therapy, just like you when you first refused. Yeah, said Ace, until that incident. Mercury hummed her agreement as she wrote down more things into Ace's patient folder. She knew that it would be a while for the therapy to stop, but Mercury was sure that with the support of Ace's actual non-blood family, Ace would be just fine. End flashback. Once Ace was done recounting his latest therapy session, Sabo and Luffy looked at Ace in somewhat horrified expressions. They knew that he had daddy issues and were glad that Whitebeard was finally giving a good outlook on father figures, but hearing this therapy session made the two brothers want to retract that outlook. Ace already had enough issues that his siblings could attest to, especially being watched by bandits. Yet, him being kidnapped and refusing every single time until months passed and he developed something akin to Stockholm Syndrome. Luffy still couldn't understand what that syndrome was, but he could hear the conflict in Ace's voice after the session. Whitebeard is literally like a celestial dragon, grumbled Sabo under his breath. Said Ace, I wouldn't go that far to calling him that. Yeah, said Hotaru, he had other crew members before his crew became, how many members again? Thousands upon thousands of members, said Ace, and only one turned out as a bad seed. So, how do you want to approach this, questioned Serenity. I'm still wrapping my head around the Stockholm Syndrome thing, said Ace, though, I also want my former spade pirates to see Mercury. Then, a hunting we will go, said Sabo impishly. Questioned Ace. Ace wants his former crew members to see Mercury about the possibility of having Stockholm Syndrome, said Sabo, so, we have to hunt them down in the village and bring them to the castle. Don't forget to tell Serenity Gibbo, mother-in-law, said Luffy. She's not your Gibbo yet, Lou, said Ace with a smile. So, while we flesh out our plan, said Hotaru, how about I summon Galdi? Roger and Portgas D. Rouge here. Hi, chorused the siblings before laughing with each other. Chapter 17, The Spade Pirates Reunion. A spiky, long light blue-haired, mask-wearing male was walking down the streets within the Silver Moon Kingdom Island. This male was named Masked Deuce, the first member of Ace's Spade Pirates crew and now a Whitebeard pirate. Masked Deuce was looking around his surroundings before walking into a bar that was owned by a blonde male named Furuhata Motoki. Motoki was a very friendly person and greeted Masked Deuce before motioning towards a table that held 18 individuals, the rest of the former Spade Pirates crew. Nodding in thanks, Masked Deuce quickly walked towards the table before being surrounded by familiar people. Deuce greeted a long, light-colored purple-haired Cornelia, his hair covering his right eye. You were late, said a blonde-haired hublot. Gomen, said Deuce, though, I do have interesting information while following the commanders. Oh, questioned the large lynx, Kotatsu, do tell. It seems that our esteemed captain is alive, said Deuce with a smirk. Laughed a shaggy, dark-colored haired ducky Bree, our captain could never die from that man. I'm not so sure about that, said the only female there, Banshee. What do you mean, questioned the crew. I mean, said Banshee, that this island is weird, even for New World standards. Didn't Ace's brother, Sabo, say that this island has magic? What if they have magic to bring back the captain? Either way, said Deuce, let's celebrate for the return of our captain. We can find him later in this island. The former Spade pirates cheered at what Masked Goose said. They would find their previous captain later, yet for now, they were going to drink until they become too drunk to stand. Motoki, on his part, smiled at the table before going to another hidden room. He knew that Queen Serenity IV had given a command to all inhabitants of her kingdom, a command to find the former Spade pirates for Ace. He didn't know why the queen gave that command, but Motoki couldn't wait for the reunion that would be held within his walls, especially when he knows that the pirates in front of him were going to become drunk. Picking up a Den Den Mushi, Motoki quickly informed the person in charge, Sailor Aluminum Siren. Moshi, hello, Sailor Aluminum Siren, said Motoki. Ah, Furuhata-san, said a chirpy voice, what can I do for you? It's about the Spade pirates, said Motoki before informing the Tenshi on their whereabouts. With the ASL brothers, Serenity, and Hotaru. Stop pestering about bringing Rouge back, Ace, said a glaring Hotaru. It was another day with the ASL brothers, Serenity, and Hotaru. Ace, on his part, kept on harassing Hotaru to summon his mother, Portgas D. Rouge, from the dead so they could have more mother-son bonding time. The first time Hotaru brought Ace's mother back, his father, Gal D. Roger, was there as well. That first meeting had Ace throwing a fiery punch through his father before giving a caring hug to his mother. Luffy had stars in his eyes as he started to question Roger on how he recruited his own crew, never once asking about the whereabouts of a certain One Piece. Ace, on the other hand, was introducing his mother to his two Imoto and Sabo because Luffy jumped towards Roger after Ace punched through him. In the end of the first meeting, Luffy invited the two ghosts to his and Serenity's wedding, making Ace and Sabo hit Luffy's head for not thinking about Serenity's own feelings about inviting more guests to their wedding. Yet, after a week since the first meeting, Ace was tolerable towards Roger while asking Rouge more of their stories before he was born whenever Hotaru agreed to use her powers. Demo, said Ace, I finally get to talk with Kachan. Ace, said Sabo, don't you think that Hotaru using her powers is quite taxing on her body? Huh, questioned Ace. Summoning the dead takes a lot out of me, said Hotaru, I know that you want to spend more time with the ghost of Rouge, Demo I also need to rest. Ah, said a sheepish Ace, Gomen, Hotaru. Sheesh, Ace, said Luffy with a laugh, even I knew that. I don't want to hear it from you, Lou, said Ace. With that, Ace started to jump on top of Luffy, Sabo quickly pulling Serenity away from the started wrestling. He was, however, not fast enough when Ace grabbed his arm and pulled him into the pile. Serenity and Hotaru sighed in exasperation as they watched the ASL brothers tumble, punch, and try to get away from each other, just to start right back again. Serenity and Hotaru backed away though, when the fight was coming closer to drawing them into the pile. It wasn't until a knock on the door stopped everyone, leaving Sabo with his foot in Luffy's face, Luffy's fist in Ace's mouth, and Ace's foot near Sabo's stomach. Hi, called out Serenity. Sires, said a female voice through the door, we have news. News, Pewter Fox, questioned Hotaru. Hi, said Pewter Fox's voice, we have received word from Aluminum Siren that the Spade Pirates are at Furuhata-san's restaurant per bar. Ha, laughed out Ace, I should have known that they would be at a bar and getting drunk. Furuhata-san also says that they know that Ace-sama is alive and well once more, informed Pewter Fox's voice. Hummed Serenity, Pewter Fox. Hi, questioned Pewter Fox's voice. Inform Kassen that we are going to Motoki-kun's place for dinner tonight, said Serenity before mumbling, pirates getting drunk before dinner time is just. Hi, Himisama, said Pewter Fox's voice. All five heard the click of Sailor Pewter Fox's heels walking away on the marble floor outside of their private room. Luffy was grinning from ear to ear as he realized just what Sailor Pewter Fox told the five. He couldn't wait to meet Ace's first pirate crew. Sabo was the same as he clasped Ace's back with one hand and squeezed Ace's shoulder in support. Ace, on his part, was nervous because his former pirate crew knew he was alive. He didn't know what was going to happen, but he hoped that Mercury's therapy sessions will include them all together to talk about what happened during their Whitebeard adventure. He looked at Serenity and Hotaru who gave supportive smiles themselves before Ace drew in a breath. Well, let's head over to Motoki's place for dinner and, started Ace. A reunion, finished off the other four. Yeah, said Ace with a smile, yeah, a reunion. At Motoki's restaurant bar. Irish Seamus welcome, called out Motoki. Motoki looked up after his call to see that the ASL brothers, Hotaru, and Serenity were at the doorway. Motoki gaped inwardly at having five royals, the brothers being adopted into royalty, at his restaurant per bar. Serenity smiled at Motoki and asked for a table for five. Motoki, who saw what Serenity wanted, nodded his head and led the five to a table that was close to the table that hosted 19 people. Ace gulped at seeing the familiar light blue hair on a certain first mate before being led to sit next to Serenity and across from Sabo. Nervous? Asked Sabo, not really concerned about the volume since the place was crowded and loud. Kind of, said Ace, I mean, I feel kind of bad that I haven't hung out with them when we integrated into Whitebeard's crew. Did you talk about that with Mercury? Questioned Hotaru. On Wednesday, prompted Ace. So, still on the Stockholm Syndrome during therapy? Questioned Sabo. Nodded Ace, it helps that it is also showing me that I kind of neglected in hanging out with them for Thatch, Haruta and the others. Yet, I think they too were pulled away to talk to the other crew members, like Deuce and the nurses. Deuce was your doctor, nay, Ace? Questioned Luffy. Ah, said Ace, one of the best. Maybe he could talk with Chopper and Mercury about doctor stuff, said a happy Luffy. Ace smiled indulgently at Luffy. No matter what adventures they all had, Luffy would want to make everyone become friends and have adventures together than being by themselves. Who knows? Maybe Masked Deuce would like to learn more medical with the other Senshi healers, like Mercury. He knew that during the downtime, Chopper would be with Mercury, Star Maker, Star Healer, Palace, Nemozine, and sometimes Hotaru together to talk about medical advancements. As he and his siblings enjoyed each other's companies and ordered their dinner with Motoki, Ace never once realized that it was quiet enough for the table that hosted the former Spade Pirates to hear Masked Deuce's name from their table. Hearing his name, Masked Deuce looked up to find out who called his name. He ignored the questioning looks from his crewmates as he looked around. There, with his eyes, Deuce spotted a familiar orange hat that had curly black hair underneath. Masked Deuce's eyes widened in surprise before having an amused glint in his eyes. Deuce, questioned a light-colored hat-wearing Kimmel, what's up? Take a look at several tables over and tell me what you see, said a smirking Deuce. Don't tell me, said a surprised kimono-wearing Kakai. Is that? Questioned a surprised gray turban-wearing Finnemore. It is, exclaimed an excited thick-side burned, short-haired Agi 68. Ace, exclaimed the former Spade Pirates. With that, 19 bodies all jumped out of their table and ran towards the table that Ace was sitting on. The ASL brothers, Serenity, and Hotaru looked up at the exclamation of Ace's name and widened their eyes. Sabo grabbed onto Hotaru while Luffy grabbed onto Serenity. All four dodged the oncoming bodies, leaving Ace to his suffocating reunion. Ace, on his part, tensed up right before 19 bodies piled up on top of him. Groaning at what his former crewmates did, Ace couldn't help but laugh heartily. He could tell that besides him missing his Spade Pirates crewmates, said crewmates missed him just as much. Okay, said Ace, okay. Get off of me, you guys. Never, said the 19 bodies. We missed you, Captain, said a cracked skull mask wearing Skull sincerely. I missed you guys too, said Ace, and, I'm so sorry that I left you all and neglected you. Neglected us? Questioned a long brown-haired Saber, what are you talking about? You stuttered Ace in guilt, since coming back to life, I've been going to therapy sessions with the Sailor Mercury. We talked about how Whitebeard acquired SA and about how I drifted away from you all. We don't blame you, Captain, said a glasses-wearing Mahal. Yeah, said a pinstriped jumpsuit wearing Leonero before confessing, we too have been doing therapy together with Deuce as our doc. We kind of know that we each have a little something called Stockholm Syndrome after that Whitebeard acquiring fiasco. And you didn't tell me, questioned Ace. It seemed that you were being happy, Captain, said Leonero, we didn't want to spoil your happiness. Yeah, echoed the others in agreement. Ace could feel the tears coming from his eyes as he bit back a wine. He knew that integrating into Whitebeard would leave something, yet he was also relieved to hear that his crew was going to be alright as well. Ace also tried to get his tears to go away as he turned his back and faced his two brothers and sisters that were smiling happily for him. However, turning his back revealed something that made the 19 people behind him gasp in surprise. Ace had forgotten about his mark being one of Mars instead of Whitebeard's. Captain, questioned Deuce slowly, what is that? My new symbol, said Ace, but with a hint of pride in his voice. New symbol, chorused the 19 people. Said Ace as he puffed his chest out, I am now the personal guard to Serenity Heim, who is also my Imoto. I think we should all sit down and talk about all of this, suggested Banshee. Yeah, said Ace, but, let me introduce you to some people. With that, Sabo, Luffy, Serenity, and Hotaru came over to the Spade Pirates and Ace. Ace, on his part, gave a pure, genuine happy smile as he introduced the four to his former pirate crew. Said pirate crew had only one thought in mind as they all pushed the tables together to get to know one another once more. I wonder if we can follow Ace as a guard to this kingdom instead of being a Whitebeard pirate. At Marineford, Sengoku, barked out Akainu, call Garp and tell him to tell us where the Silver Moon Kingdom Island is. Sir, questioned Sengoku while spying a tall, black-haired male with Akainu. We have a fiancé to find, said Akainu with a smirk. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is The Princess and the Pirate by Saranghae Tenshi. Chapter 18. Shocked Discoveries, one amused and one concerned. Sanji, called out Luffy, meet. It was another day within the kingdom, yet something was different. First of all, Ace had gotten permission to move the Spade Pirates into the castle instead of living in one of the housings for the wedding. Another thing was how well the Spade Pirates and the Strafut Pirates were conversing. They didn't know where the Whitebeard commanders were within the castle, but after Luffy introduced his crew to Ace's crew, all of them hit it off. Even Koala and Hack, Sabo's revolutionary partners, were among the two crews and getting along. Now, it was a normal day filled with Luffy's antics before going into the kitchen to be greeted by Ace's cook, Banshee, and Luffy's cook, Sanji, at the stove, leading to Luffy calling out to Sanji for some food. Luffy-sama, admonished a female wearing a Senshi outfit, only in green. Ah, said Luffy, who recognized the female, Jupiter. You know that you cannot demand meals like that, said Jupiter, who continued to scold Luffy lightly. Yeah, Lu, said Sabo, you have to ask politely. A smirk in place unless you want to go back to Neptune for those manner lessons again. EA, yelped out Luffy, not those lessons. Those were boring. Well, what do you say to your cook then, Lu, questioned Ace with amusement. Gomen, Sanji, said Luffy with a pout on his face, Demo, can I please have a snack? Sanji, on his part, looked at Luffy in awe and shock. This was the first time he could remember Luffy ever being polite to him or to any of the others. He wanted to really pinch himself because of that, but decided against it. He just believed that this politeness that Luffy was emitting at him would disappear once they go back out to sea. Sighing, Sanji turned back to where he was cooking. I, Captain, said Sanji. Shishishi, laughed Luffy, thanks, Sanji. Just a question, Luffy, said Sanji. Hummed Luffy. Why can't you be this polite whenever you want a meal or snack on the sunny, questioned Sanji with a twitch in his left eye. Ah, said Luffy, who stuck a finger into his nose, because I'm the captain and when I say something, it should sound similar to a captain's order. No, it doesn't, yelled out Sanji while Luffy laughed at Sanji's expression. Sanji sighed once more while Jupiter thought that Luffy needed to go back to manner lessons if what she heard was true. With that thought, Jupiter left the cooking to Banshee and Sanji for a moment to get in contact with Neptune about Luffy's horrendous manners. Sanji, on his part, placed a snack in front of Luffy before Banshee did the same with Ace. Sanji then turned to the others who were with them. And you guys, asked Banshee. I would love to try a parfait, said Serenity, I heard from Luffy that it tastes delicious. Of course, Serenity-kwan, said Sanji with hearts in his eyes. Hentai, muttered Hotaru before speaking up, I would also love to try a parfait as well. As you wish, Hotaru-kwan, said Sanji, who was dancing with noodle legs. Would you stop being a hentai, said Sabo with a twitch in his eye. Sadly, said Ace with a sigh, it's his personality. Just be glad he doesn't really try to flirt with them. Luffy has the strangest crew members, said Serenity with a giggle. With Garp. I worry about them, said Garp. It was another tea time between Garp and Queen Serenity IV. Even though she was busy with alliance negotiations between the nations that Luffy saved, Queen Serenity IV took the time to have some chats with Garp. Garp was one of her precious friends, even if he was still raving about how Ace, Sabo, and Luffy were not Marines. Queen Serenity IV indulged on Garp's complaints as she sipped on her tea before Garp went to the heart of the matter, which was the emotion for worry. No matter what Garp raved about, in truth, Garp was scared and worried for the three to be wanted. I worry about them, too, said Queen Serenity, however, they are grown men. Bah, said Garp, they may be grown men, but they are still children at heart. They are going up against the world, for crying out loud. Hi, said Queen Serenity, especially my soon-to-be son-in-law. Luffy will always be stubborn, said Garp with a shake of his head. Then, as adults, we should support their decision and help whenever we could, said Queen Serenity. Demo, whined Garp, it's hard. Queen Serenity IV stifled her laughter at the whine Garp produced. No matter what Garp said about the three, Garp was also a big child as well. She could tell that what happened at Marineford those years ago was still affecting Garp. Duty or family was the question and choices that Garp had. He had chosen duty over family in that moment, and with their tea time chats, Queen Serenity IV knew that Garp was still feeling guilty over it. She, however, wouldn't know that the upcoming days would become hard as something would rear back from her days from millennia ago. Until then, she would try to ease Garp's guilt. She, however, was interrupted by the familiar puri puri of a den den mushi. Ka-cha. Moshi, Moshi, said Garp as he took out a den den mushi. Garp, said the voice of Sengoku. Ah, Seni, said an overjoyed Garp, why are you calling again? Akainu would like to know where the Silver Moon Kingdom Island is, said Sengoku. Why would he want to know where my kingdom is, questioned Queen Serenity. Why you, stuttered Sengoku before his voice turned towards Garp. Garp. Well, said Garp nonchalantly, you remembered the time you called me before and I left to have tea time with the queen. It's the same every day. Sengoku sighed into the den den mushi before shaking his head. He knew that Garp would not really give out information about what he does at that island. Shaking his head, he almost missed Queen Serenity IV asking once more on why Akainu wanted to know where the island is. Sengoku answered that they may have found someone that was probably a part of the island. Both Queen Serenity IV and Garp looked at each other in confusion. For all they knew, everyone in the island was female, besides selected males such as Furuhata Motoki. They also knew that if someone was missing from the island, Queen Serenity IV would alert Garp. With their confusion, Queen Serenity IV asked, may I ask just why this Akainu believes someone from my island is missing? Ah, said Sengoku, I have a photo of said missing person. Would it be alright to send it to you now? Of course, said Queen Serenity, I want to get this misunderstanding away from us. Sengoku nodded his head on his side before letting the den den mushi scan the photo and project the image to the other side. On Queen Serenity IV and Garp's side, their den den mushi projected an image of a dark bluish black hair, deep blue-eyed male. Queen Serenity IV inwardly gasped at the image. She would recognize that male anywhere, but why was he so far away from her reincarnated daughter? Nothing made sense as she stared at the photo before the image disappeared. Do you recognize him? Questioned Sengoku. Not that I know of, lied Queen Serenity. Either way, said Sengoku, Akainu and this male would like to come to the island and talk with you. Of course, said Queen Serenity, please wait a day or two because we are moving closer to another island. We can meet there once my navigator tells us what the island is called. Alright, said Sengoku. And you can come along as well, said Queen Serenity, the more the merrier, nay. You should, Seni, laughed Garp, a vacation with your favorite friend. What do you say? If I must, said Sengoku with a sigh, I'll hear back from you later. Sore made, until then. With a loud ka-cha, the den den mushi disconnected. Garp, however, could tell that something was wrong when Queen Serenity IV sipped her tea nervously. Queen Serenity IV, on her part, was muttering about how this wasn't supposed to happen, not after her daughter already found love. Queen Serenity IV knew that she wanted her daughter to marry to bridge the Earth and the Silver Alliance together, yet being reincarnated, she now understood why her daughter would sometimes get a sad face on her face. Despite being engaged, her daughter in the past was not happy because she was not marrying for love, yet she was so sure her daughter already loved Prince Endymion V. Queen Serenity IV couldn't help the distraught face as Garp stated, you know him, don't you? Hi, said Queen Serenity, please let me gather my Masumi, Hotaru, Ace, Sabo, and Luffy before I begin my tale. HMPH, said Garp as he sipped his tea, should also bring that Akagami brat, my brat, and probably those that are already in the palace. The more that know what you are going to tell, the more we can plan ahead if something goes south. Hi, said Queen Serenity softly. Don't worry, said Garp as he gently patted Queen Serenity IV's hand, I'm sure whatever you are going to tell us will not affect the wedding. Queen Serenity IV winced inwardly at what Garp said. He wouldn't know until she disclosed everything to those in the unknown that what he said was wrong. Oh, so very wrong. With ASL, Hotaru, Serenity and others. No way that happened, said Nami in disbelief. It was now lunchtime as the Strafuts, the Spades, the ASL brothers, Hotaru, and Serenity decided to eat out in the patio. With them, Shanks, his first mate, Ben Beckman, and Usopp's father, Yasop, were with them. Usopp was ecstatic in eating lunch with his dad as Yasop felt the same. Yet, they all didn't know where the Whitebeard pirates disappeared to, but Ace wasn't too worried. He thought that they were just checking on the crew and said as such. Deuce also backed it up, saying that since this is a new territory, there were plenty to document and explore. Now, Sanji was telling everyone how Luffy was being polite to him by asking for a snack instead of demanding one. It's true, said Banshee with a smirk, I, along with the captain and his siblings, were there. It's a miracle, said Usopp in awe. Super, shouted Frankie. Yo-ho-ho-ho, said Brook, it warms my heart that Luffy has manners, yet I do not have a heart. Skull joke. Luffy-san has a lot of hidden talents, I see, said an amused Robin. I know, said Nami, why can't you do manners all the time, Luffy? Luffy just shrugged while he, Sabo, and Ace were trying to steal food off of each other's plates. Everyone saw the shrug and what was happening before sweat dropping. Just looking at the brothers and you would think they never had manners to begin with. Serenity and Hotaru just sighed at what they saw. They couldn't believe their brothers could act like that. At least, everyone was getting along. It wasn't long that the Whitebeard pirates came back to sea. Deuce, questioned Izo. Yo, said Deuce. So, this is where you and the others disappeared to, said Blenheim. Got invited by Serenity Heim herself to stay in the castle instead of the housings, said Deuce. Yeah, said Saber, even though the housings were very nice, we prefer to hang out with an alive Ace. With that, all of the Spade pirates gave a pointed look at the Whitebeard pirates, making the commanders look sheepish. Of course, there would be rumors circling about Ace once the shop owners around the island mentioned said person. It wasn't like the commanders didn't want to tell their crew about their now alive Nakama, but it was just they wanted to talk to Ace and ask him just why he said that they were not brothers. Before they could say anything, a green-haired senshi that had red highlights in her outfit and an orange-haired senshi that had green highlights in her outfit came before the large group. Serenity Himisama, said the one in the green highlights, Phi. Ace-sama, said the one in the red highlights, Kai. Sailor Kai, Phi, said Ace and Serenity respectively. Serenity Jusama would like you both and your companions to go into the throne room, said Phi. She says that it is urgent, said Kai. Well, said Ace in confusion, guess we're all going into the throne room. Thank you, Captain Obvious, said Sabo sarcastically. I wonder why the queen wants to talk to us, said Chopper confusedly. Well, let's go, said Nami with a clasp of her hands, can't let the queen be waiting for us. Demo, whined Luffy, I'm not done eating yet. Luffy, groaned out everyone who knew Luffy's personality. Chapter 19, Interlude. Luffy's Star Locket. Luffy, questioned Nami. Yeah, questioned Luffy. Where did you get that chain and star locket that you always have in your pocket, questioned Nami. It was a lovely afternoon that the Strafuts, Vivi, Rebecca, and Shirahoshi were listening to Sabo, Luffy, and Hotaru talk about Luffy's childhood while Serenity, on her part, snuck off to wait for Ace to be done with his therapy session. After getting surprised by Luffy marrying to a princess of all things, the Strafut pirates and the three princesses were very curious about Luffy's childhood. It didn't take long for them to learn that Ace and Sabo tried to kill Luffy before their brotherhood over sake. Hotaru was snickering at how Sabo was flushed at that story while telling them how Luffy first proclaimed that he would marry Serenity. Then, after Luffy told them the bear incident that not even Sabo knew about, Nami finally remembered something that always hung within Luffy's blue shorts. She couldn't even remember Luffy parting with that locket and chain. Ah, said Luffy, it's a gift. A gift, questioned Vivi. Nodded Luffy happily. Star locket, questioned Sabo. It was a gift after you, disappeared, explained Hotaru before turning to Luffy, I'm surprised you still have that. He never parts with that star locket, said an exasperated Usopp, even when fighting our enemies. Sabo and Hotaru, along with Vivi, Rebecca, and Shirahoshi, saw the other Strafuts nod their head as they recounted several incidents where he would become a bit furious with their enemies for even touching the star locket in question. Though, to be fair, Luffy should have kept the locket in a safe place on their ship, going merry for the Alabasta adventure and the Thousand Sunny for the Punk Hazard adventure. It was just a good thing that the star locket had not taken any damage during all those fights the Strafuts were participated in. To bring back what they were talking about, Rebecca questioned Luffy and, to an extent, Hotaru about the star locket. So, Serenity Heim gave it to you as a gift, Lucy-san, questioned Rebecca. Said Luffy, it's one of my most favorite treasures. The other three are my Usagi-chan, my straw hat, and my brothers and sister. Lu, said Sabo with a flustered look on his face. He says the darnest things, said Hotaru who had a smile on her face. Well, said Luffy with a pout, it's true. So, Luffy, said Frankie, can you tell us this super tale on how you got that star locket? Sure, exclaimed Luffy. Flashback. Ace, questioned Luffy sleepily, where are you going? It was a very sunny morning. Luffy was rubbing his eyes as he looked at his older brother who was trying to sneak out of the tree house that both of them were sleeping in. The both tried to ignore the idea that the tree house was supposed to house 3 boys instead of 2. Ace, on his part, cursed inwardly as Luffy was looking at him expectantly. Don't tell me you are getting a head start in becoming stronger, accused Luffy. And no, said Ace, besides, I told you yesterday where I would be going today. You did, questioned Luffy with a tilt of his head. Yeah, said Ace, remember. I have manner lessons with Makino. Oh yeah, said Luffy. groaned Ace. Anyways. I'm going. Luffy glares at Luffy and stay out of trouble while I'm gone. Luffy just giggled his signature laugh before nodding his head. Ace, on the other hand, wondered if it was a good idea to leave Luffy alone. Flashback interrupted. Ace actually went to learn manners from Makino, asked a bemused Sabo. Nodded Luffy as he laughed, he would always get something wrong. I bet he did, said Sabo. That doesn't explain the star locket, said Shirahoshi. We're getting there, said Hotaru, though, I'll tell the next part. Luffy wasn't with us. Questioned Luffy. Flashback continues. You were late, said Hotaru. Since Luffy knew that Ace was going to Makino's place, Ace didn't have to worry about Luffy trying to follow him. He knew that Luffy knew that Ace needed a lot of work on his manners, and interrupting his lessons was a big no. Ace, on his part, arrived at Makino's place, only to be scolded by Hotaru for being late. Ace could see Serenity holding onto her laughter at Hotaru's accusation while he tried not to pout. Not my fault that Lou woke up while I was leaving, said Ace. He didn't follow you, did he? Asked a worried Serenity. Nah, said Ace, Lou knows not to distract me while I learn manners. Hotaru and Serenity giggled together as Ace gave a face while saying that he was learning manners. Makino smiled knowingly as she placed breakfast plate on the counter for Ace to eat. Ace thanked Makino before chowing down on the food. Hotaru and Serenity was still a bit perturbed on how Ace and Luffy would eat their food. After Ace finished eating, he looked at the three females in front of him. So, what is there left for Lou's party? Questioned Ace. Well, we already created the banner, said Makino, all that's left is making the cake and decorating the party bar. I'm going to stay away from baking the cake, said Serenity bashfully, I tried to bake once and it didn't end well. I'll decorate with you, Sarah, said Ace, never baked a cake before and don't plan on making the cake worse. I guess that leaves me to help Makino bake the cake, said Hotaru. Huh, said Ace as he looked at the calendar, still can't believe Lou's birthday is today. Even though it's also Children's Day, questioned and amused Makino. Flashback interrupted. Children's Day, chorused the Strafuts and the three princesses. Yeah, said Sabo, what about it? Children's Day is May 5th, right? Questioned Robin. Said Luffy, my birthday. Luffy, growled Zoro, why didn't you tell us that your birthday is May 5th? You never asked, said Luffy. Luffy, sighed Nami, don't you think that as your crew, we would want to know your birthday, whether we asked or not? We would have a party for you and lots of delicious food, said Sanji. And a lot of presents, said Brook. But, said Luffy, having adventures with you all is one of my best presents I can have on my birthday. Luffy, said the Strafuts with soft eyes. Anyways, said Vivi, next time, we can celebrate your birthday with all of your nakama. Wouldn't that be great? Yeah, said Luffy with a huge smile, sure. So, said Hotaru who got everyone back to the story, it was the afternoon that Ace left to fetch Luffy for the party. Flashback continues. Where are we going, Ace? Questioned Luffy. Luffy was sporting a huge bump on his head. Apparently, Ace found Luffy when he was about to get eaten by a huge snake. Luffy complained that it wasn't his fault that Ace left and told him not to distract him from his lessons. Ace, however, just glared head on as he dragged Luffy away from the danger and towards the road that went to Fuchsia village. When Luffy asked where they were going, Ace wasn't talking or explaining where the two were going. He was still scared about how Luffy was about to be eaten and he wasn't there to save his little brother. Ace, questioned Luffy. Shut up, said Ace, I told you to not get into trouble, and what do? You almost get eaten by a giant snake. I said I was sorry, complained Luffy. Ace just sighed as he looked at Luffy. He could tell that Luffy was sorry, but he also knew that Luffy would do it again after forgetting. He could also tell that Luffy forgot that today was his birthday. Smirking inwardly, Ace led Luffy towards Makino's party bar. Luffy, on his part, brightened up some as he saw Makino's establishment before looking at Ace questioningly. Ace just motioned for Luffy to go towards the bar before following the excited Luffy. Makino, shouted Luffy before. Tanjobi Omedito, happy birthday, Luffy, exclaimed people in the bar. Mayor, Makino, Hotaru, Ace, Mina, everyone, said a teary-eyed Luffy. And what about her? Questioned Ace who motioned at another female. Usagi-chan, exclaimed Luffy. With that shout, everyone saw Luffy sling shot at Serenity before wrapping her up a couple of times with his arms. Serenity was giggling before patting Luffy's head, even though Luffy was a bit taller than her. Serenity repeated happy 10th birthday to Luffy before wiggling out of his hold. Flashback interrupted. This was his 10th birthday, questioned Rebecca. Hi, said a confused Hotaru, why do you ask? Then, What about his other birthdays? Questioned Frankie. I know that Ace and I found out about Lou's birthday after we were celebrating Children's Day in Fuchsia Village, said Sabo. Makino dragged all three of us to her party bar and celebrated Lou's birthday then. Ace would celebrate my 9th birthday together with the bandits because Gramps was visiting, said Luffy. We couldn't go to Makino's since Gramps forbade us to go to Fuchsia Village. Yet, that didn't stop you, said a smirking Sabo. No way, said Luffy, Makino is the best. Have to visit, especially if Ace was taking manner lessons. So, said Robin, what happened during the party? Well, said Hotaru. Flashback continues. Save some food for the rest of us, said Ace as he bopped Luffy's head again. The birthday party was in full swing, especially since this was the first time Hotaru and Serenity would be celebrating Luffy's birthday. Luffy was getting everyone to sing and dance while taking all of Serenity's dance time. Ace did get a couple of dances with Serenity before Luffy openly glared at Ace and pulled her to dance with him throughout the afternoon night. Ace and Hotaru snickered as Luffy dipped Serenity in his arms before pulling her up. It wasn't before Makino stopped Luffy from eating by placing a present in front of him. You can't eat later, Luffy, said Makino with a smile. Demo, don't you want to know what everyone got you? Always, said a happy Luffy. Then, open this one first, said Makino, it's from the mayor. With that, Luffy opened a ton of presents. He was happy about all the robot figurines he had gotten and raced upstairs to place it in the empty bedroom he occupied as a little boy. Running back down, Luffy hugged Ace for his present, which was a new pipe for hunting. Hotaru gave him a ship in a bottle, the ship having the ASL Jolly Roger as its flag. Luffy hugged Hotaru and started to ask her a lot of questions on how she did this. However, Hotaru was spared when Serenity was the last one to give her gift to Luffy. Luffy eagerly opened it up before pulling out a golden star locket that had a gold chain with it. Usagi, questioned Luffy. Mama said that this locket was special, said Serenity, it could play a peaceful song. Demo, I asked Mama to help me adjust it some. Questioned Luffy, adjust. Nodded Serenity, open it and find out. Luffy looked a bit put out at the gift until he opened the locket. For sure, the locket played a melody while the crescent moon in the center lit up. The light, however, was what everyone was focused on. As the light flared up, images of happier times with Sabo, Hotaru, Serenity, Ace, and Luffy together or separately in duos or trios showed up in the light. Luffy, Ace, and Hotaru looked on in surprise and nostalgic as Makino's image also flared while helping the ASL brothers fit their clothes for the first time. So cool, said Luffy. It also has magic to update the images and to make sure that it doesn't get damaged no matter what you do, said Serenity. That's good magic, said Ace. No need to know that Luffy will get into massive trouble when he sets sail at 17. Nodded Serenity. Mama also got Sailor Pluto to help with the images too. Usagi-chan, said Luffy. Serenity. Arigato, said Luffy as he kissed Serenity's cheek, making Serenity blush so much at the contact. Flashback ends. As the story ended, Luffy took out the exact golden star locket and opened it up. Everyone heard the soothing melody as the crescent moon lit up once more. There, within the light, was how Hotaru, Serenity, Ace, Sabo, and Luffy met before switching to cherry blossoms covering the Thousand Sunny as the Strafuts partied. It also showed Vivi, Rebecca, and Shirahoshi within some of the images as well. It also showed Luffy crying happy tears while wrapping his arms around the now adult Sabo during Dressrosa. Still one of the best presents ever, said Luffy happily. I concur, said Sabo with a smile. Though, next year, we're celebrating your birthday, Captain, said Zoro. Shishishi, laughed Luffy, of course, Zoro. I guess I should start planning the food, sighed Sanji, no telling how many people will be celebrating with you, Captain. Shishishi, laughed Luffy more, nothing but the best Sanji. Let's also have Sea King meet. Aye, Captain, said Sanji who took a mental note on that request. Chapter 20, The Truth of Reincarnation is Revealed. You asked for us, Okachan, questioned Serenity. It took a while to get to the throne room because Luffy would just not stop eating. Because of that, Luffy was sporting a big bump on his head while Ace and Sabo were berating Luffy all the way to the throne room. There, the Whitebeard Pirates, the Spade Pirates, the Strafut Pirates, Hotaru, Shanks, Ben, Yasop, Serenity, and the ASL brothers saw Dragon, Koala, Garp, Vivi, Rebecca, Shirahoshi, their fathers, a Sailor Senshi, and Queen Serenity IV. Serenity, Hotaru, and the ASL brothers could tell that Queen Serenity IV looked quite nervous while the Sailor Senshi had a tight grasp on her staff. Also, said Ace, why is Sailor Pluto here? Come in, everyone, said Queen Serenity, we need to have a talk. Is this about my manners? Questioned Luffy before puffing his cheeks out. I already told Jupiter that I don't want any more lessons on those. What are you on about, brat? Questioned Garp incredulously. So, this isn't about me being rude and demanding meat from Sanji? Questioned Luffy. Said Queen Serenity, who looked a bit miffed. Demo, we will be talking about that at a later time, Luffy. Whined Luffy. The Strafuts mentally face-palmed at their captain. They couldn't believe Luffy just ousted himself to the queen about his manners. Serenity, Hotaru, and Luffy's brothers sighed outwardly when they heard Luffy. Although they love him to bits, Luffy could still be absent-minded about some things. Queen Serenity IV, on her part, just gestured for everyone to have a seat in front of the throne room. Seeing that the queen herself didn't change from her tense posture, everyone quickly sat on the floor of the throne room, all eyes on the queen herself. Now that you all are here, said Queen Serenity, I have a confession to make. A confession? Questioned King Neptune. Hi, said Queen Serenity, this story dates back to over a millennia ago. A millennia ago, yelped out Haruta. Quiet, hissed out King Du. What is this confession? Asked Ben. Well, said Queen Serenity, who looked flustered, please listen to my story. The confession will be at the end. Everyone nodded their heads as they tried to understand why Queen Serenity IV looked so flustered. Sailor Pluto, the only Senshi present, smiled reassuringly to Queen Serenity IV before she started to glow her planetary color, dark green with hints of purple maroon. Everyone, besides the ASL brothers, Hotaru, and Serenity, was taken aback at the glowing Sailor Senshi. Sure, they saw the Senshi's attacks glow, especially when they had a talisman or artifact in hand, but they never have seen an actual Sailor Senshi glow their respective color before. Sailor Pluto, on her part, started to chant in a language no one, besides those in the known, knew about before slamming her staff down onto the throne room's floor. Said floor started to glow the same eerie color as Sailor Pluto before it vanished, leaving them in a different place. What is this, Yoi? Questioned Marco. Look, pointed Rebecca at the sky. Is that our planet? Nani, yelled out everyone before turning to where Rebecca was pointing at. It was true. The earth that they lived on was above them while they were standing somewhere else. Looking at each other, they wondered where they were. They didn't even see Queen Serenity IV and Sailor Pluto with them at all, but in their places were two familiar females, well, familiar to the ASL brothers, Hotaru, Serenity, and Garp. One of the females had black hair with tints of green in it and brown eyes, Makino. The other female had long, orange, curly hair and looked a bit muscular than feminine, curly Dayton. Dayton, questioned Garp. Makino, yelled out a happy Luffy. Luffy, said Makino. Shanks. Makino, said Shanks with a smile. Where are we, Garp? Questioned Dayton in a gruffly voice. How should I know, said Garp. We all, besides you and Makino, were in the throne room until Pluto did this kind of spell, I guess you could say, and transported us to wherever here is. Welcome to the moon, said Pluto's voice from somewhere, the moon over a millennia ago. The moon, yelped out everyone. How is that possible? Questioned Chopper. All will be explained, said Queen Serenity. Demo, the confession I have is placed a millennia ago. With that, Queen Serenity IV's voice started to tell the story about a silver alliance with all of the planets of the solar system, besides Earth. She told them that it was a peaceful time with little to no hiccups from evil. As she told the story with her voice, everyone was rendered speechless as they followed and watched what appears to be a memory. Queen Serenity IV told them all about a Queen of the Moon giving birth to her daughter and everyone rejoicing. Everyone, however, was taken aback when they saw said Queen of the Moon looking exactly like Queen Serenity IV. They were taken aback once more when the so-called Princess of the Moon looked exactly like Princess Serenity V. Luffy was starry-eyed right until the memory showed something a bit unpleasant. Welcome, King Endymion IV, said Queen Serenity IV. Hi, said King Endymion, arigato for having me here. This here points to a boy that was a bit much older than Princess Serenity V as my son, Prince Endymion V. And, said Queen Serenity, who gestured to Princess Serenity V, this is my daughter, Princess Serenity V. As the two talked, everyone saw Princess Serenity V waved a bit at Prince Endymion V before being uninterested at him. Everyone could tell that whatever was happening was making Princess Serenity V agitated. Prince Endymion V looked at Princess Serenity V as though she was a prize to be won. They could see the elation just as they heard. It is decided then, said King Endymion, my son and your daughter will be engaged to form an alliance together. Hi, said Queen Serenity, I am sure that after they marry, the Silver Alliance will flourish with even more peace. It will be an honor to marry Princess Serenity V, said Prince Endymion V with a condescending tone. Why does he remind me of the nobles? Questioned Sabo in disgust. Saranghae is not a prize, you, started Ace before almost cursing the past prince. Is this the confession that Queen Serenity IV wants us to know about? Questioned Robin. I don't know, said Frankie. Demo, this prince is giving me super bad vibes. At once, everyone started to comment on what they saw. It wasn't until they got to how, but weirdly, the princess from the past started to fall for this prince. They could see that the prince also mellowed out and start to fall for the past princess. Luffy clutched Serenity closer to him as he watched the prince give the princess a familiar star-shaped locket that played the exact same song. It wasn't until the end that all were forced to watch something that had them gasping in horror. Hidoi Deizu, it's terrible, exclaimed a black cat. Luna, Hidoi Deizu. The people of Earth are attacking us, called out a white cat, Artemis. Everyone from Earth looked on as a black mass of evil descended onto the peaceful Silver Alliance before black lightning shot down from the sky. The females gasped in horror as they covered their mouths, watching the destruction of the Silver Alliance. Pillars started to fall down just as the sailor Senshi of the past began to fight what appeared to be evil monsters. When Queen Serenity IV described how the sailor Senshi were fighting what were called Yoma, everyone watched as one by one, the sailor Senshi fell to their deaths. It shook them much worse because the actual past princess too fell to her death, Queen Serenity IV using a crystal that what the present queen called the Ginzuisho, silver crystal, to defeat the evil. Luna, said Queen Serenity as she was on a broken pillar and exhausted. Artemis. Yes, said the two. The Ginzuisho can bring peace into the world when used by someone with a pure heart, said Queen Serenity. Demo, when it is used by someone with an evil heart, it immediately becomes a frightening weapon. That's enough, said Luna, please don't talk anymore. With the power of the Ginzuisho, said Queen Serenity, I was able to destroy Metalia and her forces. However, I can't go on without my precious daughter. Queen Serenity, questioned Artemis. Princess Serenity and all of the other sailor guardians, said Queen Serenity, may your future lives on Earth be filled with love, kindness, and hope. Some had tears in their eyes as they watched what the past queen did with the Ginzuisho. The silver brilliant flare blinded all before they opened their eyes to see all of them back in the throne room. Even Makino and Dayton were in the throne room when they weren't there beforehand. Even though Luffy wrapped his arm around Serenity's waist, it didn't stop Ace and Sabo from hugging the life out of Serenity. They really wish they didn't have to see their Imoto die like that again. Queen Serenity IV, on her part, looked weary as she finished her tale with Sailor Pluto's help. As you can see, said Queen Serenity, we all look similar to those of the past. Why is that? Questioned Curiel. With the powers of the Ginzuisho, said Queen Serenity, we all were reincarnated into this future, this new Silver Moon Kingdom. This island is not just any kingdom, but the past that we have lived in a millennia ago. So, you all are reincarnates, yelped out Koala. Hi, said Queen Serenity. So, why confess this now? Questioned King Cobra, what is so significant that you just had to tell us this story? Queen Serenity IV turned to Garp who, in his hand, held a Den Den Mushi. Garp, in turn, showed the same picture that Sengoku sent to Queen Serenity IV and Garp hours ago. Everyone took a step back as the holographic picture showed something that they were not aware of. There, they saw the same past prince, yet in more modern attire to their own. Luffy held Serenity closer as he stared at the past prince's image. As you can see, said Queen Serenity, Prince Endymion V has been reincarnated as well. Demo, why wasn't he here to begin with? Questioned Vivi. I do not know why, said Queen Serenity. I do, however, know that he remembers and wants to come here. Yeah, said Garp, the downside is that the new fleet admiral will be with him. There's a new fleet admiral, questioned Yasop. Hi, said Garp with a serious face, this new fleet admiral is, Akainu. Nani, shouted everyone in horror. With the reincarnated Endymion. Soon, my love, said Endymion, I will be with you soon. Mamoru, questioned a marine. Hi, questioned Mamoru. Your Tosin would like to tell you of the plan, said the marine. I'm coming, said Mamoru as he turned away from the ocean.